Welcome, everyone. I believe we are live. I just wanted that to be confirmed on the YouTube stream I'm looking at as well. Cool. So welcome, everyone, to the second Teaching Online Summit from AppsEvents. So my name is Ben. You'll see I've got Jon, Kim, and Bogdan with me, who I'm going to introduce in a moment. I noticed a number of people signed up for our earlier version of this that was kind of more focused around the Asia Pacific region. Hey, Jasmine, welcome. So yeah, it's really nice to have you all along. I can see we've got about 30 people to start off with. So that's really great and really appreciate your time during these strange times. And obviously we'll be making a nod to distance learning practices and the situation that we've all encountered as educators and trainers because of COVID-19. So yeah, I'll just let people arrive. Welcome, Dave, Lucinda, Scott, Raj, Jenny Lou. As we go through, I will be bringing in a few comments as we go so we can see who's on. Thank you to everyone that's joining and saying hello as well. Great to have you on board. Okay, so keep the welcomes coming, and obviously please use the chat throughout to ask any questions. So as we initially start discussing EdTech and distance learning at the beginning, then please feel free to steer us towards your questions, or particularly if you're doing things that solve some of the challenges we talk about, then we'd love to hear from you as well. And also, when Kim, Bogdan, and Jon are presenting, if you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we pick up those key questions that the presenters can latch onto and share as well. All right, without further ado, I'll just get into a little bit of an overview of what we're looking at today. So I know some of you did join this morning, if you're talking Europe time, as well as today. And I hope we've got something a little bit different for you and a little bit of a good menu for you this afternoon as well. Okay, so we're going to be kicking off with a little bit of a discussion between the presenters we got today. So my name is Ben. I'm a UK director for AppsEvents. I've been with AppsEvents for about a couple of years now, full time. I think I did my first AppsEvents event back in 2014. So I'd attended the Google Teacher Academy, now the Innovator Academy, in 2013, December 2013. And I got invited along by a chap called Evan Scher to Frankfurt. He asked me if I wanted to present a session in Frankfurt, and I was kind of like, sure. So I got myself along, presented a session. It turns out it was an AppsEvents event, and I've been presenting a little bit more over the years for them. I was previously a maths teacher for around 13 years, and it's kind of really fascinating from outside the classroom now to be watching what everyone's dealing with, because I thought my 13 years had their challenging moments, but I think this one wins. Especially with a 5- and 8-year-old at home, trying to think about how that would work with some of the schools I've taught at. So congratulations to you all, and I hope you are getting some sort of break over Easter, though it feels like it merges slightly into school and break. So Kim is an EdTech specialist at the Bavarian International School, originally from the west coast of the US, but now full-on Uber integrated into Germany, right?
Yep.
Bogdan is based in Prague, but originally from Romania. Bogdan's one of our most experienced EdTech coaches and a Google certified trainer. So we're looking forward to hearing him. And in fact, he'll tell you himself, he loves a Chromebook. And Jon,
I do.
fact. We have people actually calling out Bogdan's sessions that are quite excited. So maybe I need to move on to those ones quicker. And we've got Jon Neale. So Jon Neale is a senior leader and EdTech specialist at Halcyon International School, an Apple Distinguished Educator and a Google for Education Innovator and Trainer. And hopefully, if you don't follow all three of them already, we'll give you the chance to get onto their Twitter handles and see what they're sharing, because they've got lots to share, not just today, but always. So we just want to thank Acer, who are supporting our efforts with this online training and also support us throughout the year. So please feel free to include their hashtag as you share your learnings from today. And also more widely, if you're sharing, then please feel free to use Google PD and the AppsEvents hashtags and jump into the AppsEvents Twitter account as well. We're really pleased to hear any of your feedback on the highs and hopefully not too many lows from this next couple of hours or so. So the first thing we're going to talk about, starting in the next few moments, is just a discussion around how might we make distance learning effective. And we're going to try and approach some particular challenge areas that you're probably all experiencing or maybe just trying to grapple with. And we'd really like to hear any solutions that you've got and put in place for that as well. Moving on from that, so at 4:30 Central European time, or if we do we have any East Coasters? I'll have a look on the chat to see if anyone has joined us from stateside. John Micton is here. We've got that. Right, everyone, up your game. Awesome. So at 4:30, Kim will be getting us started with a collaborative Jamboard and look at that tool. So for those of you that are kind of missing your interactive whiteboards and looking for a solution, then you've got that. And if you're already using it, hopefully some tips and tricks that you can take back into getting more collaborative distance. Kim will then be picking up PearDeck for distance learning. So using how you can use PearDeck to sort of manage that distance learning environment. Then we're going to move over to Bogdan, who's going to look at Google Forms. Now, I've seen some really effective distance learning uses of forms with the schools that we've been working with, mood check-ins, as well as quizzes and surveys. So we're going to start with a 30-minute sort of get started with Google Forms. And then Bogdan is going to shift up a gear for spice up your forms. So for the second 30 minutes, he's going to really go deeper into how you can use forms in some interesting and engaging ways. So look out for that one. And then last but certainly not least, Jon is going to spend some time looking at Google Classroom. Many of you may be familiar with Google's kind of flagship education tool, but more particularly for distance learning, we're going to look at some tips for how you can manage distance learning with Google Classroom using the topics, using the different features, and sort of really getting the best out of that for children that are learning from a distance. So let's have a look at what we've got coming up. Just wanted to say everyone's loving Bogdan at the moment, which is fair. We've got Liz from Tennessee, who's on Central US time. So that must be a nice early start. Really appreciate that effort. Avinash, who is joining us from India. So good evening to you, sir. And we've got some more local ones to me from the UK. Great international audience. Netherlands represented. Awesome. Nice to have a global audience in. Right. So Jon, Kim, and Bogdan, welcome. And what we're going to start by talking about was some of the key challenges when you're approaching distance learning. Now, I've summarized it into 5 areas. Please, in the chat, if you think there are some other things that you're grappling with, then we'd love to sort of hear what you think we should add to this list. But one of the key things I've found is staff and student well-being. I think something we've all appreciated is teachers teaching from home are not just teachers. They're carers, they're parents. They might have several children at different schools that they're trying to manage work for, amongst everything else. So it's not as easy as just sitting at home and teaching the whole day uninterrupted. So we've also got to look at that. And obviously for students, where we always have discussions around screen time. I think Jon was the one that introduced me to a great talk about screen time, where sort of relating it to food. There's good food and there's bad food, and there's good screen time and there's bad screen time. But we can probably all agree that just using distance learning as looking at screen all day is probably not the way we want to do that. One particular thing for me, I used to teach at a couple of schools where we had maybe more than our fair share of students that you might refer to as vulnerable. So I've been spending a lot of time thinking and sort of talking to former colleagues about that pastoral role that teachers take in school. How is that being transferred into that online experience? For those students where school is sanctuary, I'm sort of particularly interested in how we continue to look out for them when maybe home life isn't exactly what they'd hope it would be and what we'd hope it would be. We're also going to look at the tools and the pedagogy. There's some global agreed sort of standards for pedagogy that can still be maintained from a distance. And And then a big thing that's come up, I think I saw some comments this morning, were around, it's all very good and well having all these tools, but for some teachers, the transition from in-classroom instruction to online instruction is not necessarily an easy step to make. So we're going to sort of a little nod to that. And we'd really love to hear how you're supporting the teachers that you might be working with to make that transition to tools that they didn't necessarily think they were going to be using so abruptly. Okay, so there's a few comments coming into the chat there, hi from South Africa as well, around some of the challenges. So I'll pick up on those. Yeah, so if I sort of switch so you can get a little bit of a better view of everyone. Hi, everyone. How is everyone?
Good. Great.
Excited.
Yeah. So, Jon, I know when we picked up on staff and student well-being in our preparation for this, it was something around, you made a few comments around community.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to pick up on that to get us started.
Yeah, sure. I think, so we're in a position where the school that I'm at, we're a one-to-one school. We're kind of really familiar with using the tools in our classroom, but actually the kind of one of the biggest concerns for us was how we were going to maintain a sense of community. And in doing so, we feel provide a nice platform for staff and student, for them to still feel involved, to feel that they're not in isolation, and that they're still able to connect with other parts of their usual teams. And I think that we've tried different things to varying levels of success. We've done things like put an online staff room up, which is a permanent link, but that kind of didn't get too much traction. We've tried other things like having like a kind of like a coffee hour at the end of the day just to check in and see how things are going. But I think one of the best things as well has been to connect with people outside of my own school and to see what other educators, what other digital leaders have been doing. And I think that one of the sort of big positives has been that not only community within our own school, but the sort of wider educational community and how everyone's come together has been like a real positive. And I'd hope that looking forward that's something that's only going to grow.
I think the community thing is really interesting. I've seen, obviously, when this first started, everyone jumped to Zoom and Hangouts, Meet, Google Meet, to try and sort of facilitate that video call. And it seemed initially it was, how do we replicate the classroom environment online? But what I've seen more recently is video calls actually being used more for the sort of connection part, the personal connections. My own children who are 5 and 8, my 5-year-old had a class call, which was not a learning focused one. It was just a social call to sort of bring them back together and share what they were doing. And I've seen a lot more of that usage recently. Kim, I think you've had a few sort of community attempts at your school as well, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. Our librarian has been fantastic, and she's done a spirit day, a spirit theme. Every day there's something that she wants the kids to do, just a simple photo of, one day it was you in sunglasses. So everybody who wanted to was sending in photos of them in sunglasses, or send a family photo in, or you doing something active outside or in your house. And then she'll collate all those photos together in a little slideshow that goes out to the whole community at the end of the week, which is really fun. And the kids really look forward to seeing that and seeing their friends pop up in the slideshow. And it's been great for us as staff who aren't seeing the kids all the time, to have that one place where we're seeing everybody participating in something. And like you were saying, Ben, the Google Meets for us, or Zoom chats, have been turning more into a social time for the kids. Yes, we're doing some direct instruction, but that's usually with smaller groups. But whole class times where we're all just getting together and talking about, or teachers are reading a story to the whole class, or starting up a quick discussion about what they're doing at home or what they miss, or just to catch up. It's really important that the kids look so forward to those times when they're seeing their friends, even just to see their faces on the screen. It's been really important. And for staff, it's we've tried the same, Jon, as even a cocktail hour on a Wednesday evening or something for people who want to get together just for a few minutes to chat and connect. And then people are making their own connections in different groups and stuff outside of school as well. It is really important.
I'll be interested to see as time progresses and the situation changes. There's many things we've been sort of forced into looking at. I'll be really interested to see what sticks.
Yeah.
And are there going to be some things? I've also noticed a lot more value on maybe the softer skills than maybe we sometimes get in education, where we can sort of fall into looking at grades and sort of more tangible parts of education. And there's been a push towards that community sharing. So that's been really interesting. I don't know if Bogdan, you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, and I actually want to add something on top of that idea of the community, but the wider community outside of your school and your students. So that's one part of creating the community within the school domain, so to say. But what I've seen nowadays is teachers that stayed away from social media, stayed away from Twitter chats, stayed away from shared resources online. Now they turn to other educators around the world and ask for help. And those educators offer help as well. So I think that's a key component here. But more than that, I think that's also very helpful talking about well-being for the teachers to realize that, hey, I'm not the only teacher that maybe is running out of ideas. I'm not the only teacher that maybe is stressed out during this period. I'm not the only teacher that's dealing with kids at home and teaching online and I don't know what. And seeing that there are other teachers around and understanding this, accepting this, acknowledging this can also help you in terms of, hey, I'm not going crazy. It's not only me. And I can ask for help. I can find support in one way or the other. I just need to reach out. Now, I'm not saying that you'll find all the answers in a heartbeat, but it's good to know that you're not alone. You're not going through this on your own, basically.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys can also see some of the comments coming through about using the live time for consolidation rather than teaching, but also cocktail hour. Whatever the content of those cocktails is, I think we can all get behind that kind of spirit that Scott is sharing there. So keep those ideas coming. We've also got here, we're still having our lunch break fun using Kahoot. The students for our advisory still continues. So that there's here, we are still having normal school hours. And something we might get into in a little bit is that schedule. What type of schedules are different schools putting in place? Because I've seen everything from the school schedule picked up and delivered online through to a really open version of that as well. So thank you for your comments and keep them coming. Okay, so that kind of community bit, I think I'm really interested to see how people are dealing with that. And we've had a comment from Amy about like the schedule helps with making things, or sort of having that normal, sort of what is normal now, the new normal, which I think is going to be a little hashtag I'm going to commandeer for myself. But that is probably also really valuable for those vulnerable students. So I had a pastoral role for a number of years in my school, which obviously meant that as well as delivering my maths lessons, all those little subtle things you do, like checking whether the clothes that the child is wearing look like they've been, washed and looked after in the last few days. In some of my schools, checking that their pupils aren't too dilated. But all these little things that you check as you walk around the school, how are schools managing that? How are they keeping tabs on those students that they would normally sort of check in on each day? And I don't know if anyone's sort of got any insights into how their schools are doing it. But that, I think, something that I think is maybe the timetable and having those regular check-ins and some normal schedule is one of the ways that they might be doing that.
Our school is pretty fortunate that we have a counseling department and we have learning support specialists available. So they're actually booking Google Meet sessions with their kids and then staying in contact with the class teacher as well about what the teacher's posting for work, so that they can get involved if necessary to support those kids. And it has been really good that the counselors as well have been participating in sessions with the students who they feel need it. It's on a voluntary basis, so the kids can say, yeah, I would really like to chat with the counselor today. And if they're normally someone who would chat with the counselor, then they're getting some time to do that, which is, it's good to have those resources available. I know not every school has that luxury to have those people available to do those roles, but it's been very beneficial for us, for those kids.
Yeah, and we've had a couple of comments, or a question actually here, but just before I get to the question, sort of Amy was saying that There are obviously schools are still providing breakfast and lunches. I know in the UK that parents who qualify for free school meals for their children can get a voucher, but I know there's been some issues getting a hold of that. I think we'll have probably all seen in every country there are plans in place for lots of people, but actually getting through to accessing those is not necessarily straightforward. We've got here from Scott, our learning support team they check in to our families once a week. So they're sort of splitting up those key students that they want to check in with. We've also obviously got the registers, so register in Google Classroom. And obviously we'll be talking about Google Forms, which is a nice way to do a nice, easy, low stakes check-in with the children each day and throughout the week. And then either here, we continue to try and make it as normal as possible for our students. Students are not allowed to be in their bedrooms alone during their video classes, which probably brings me back to the question here that Jonathan was asking, which is how are your schools taking the privacy and ethical issues with the live teaching and cyberbullying, etc. I might talk for a little bit to give you a chance to bring up any ideas about that. But yeah, just jumping back onto the point about, there was a question we had in another live chat, which was about a student asked if they could join in their pajamas. And the teacher was asking whether they should allow that or not. And I think the simple reply was, would you let them walk into your lesson in pajamas? And a lot of the time it's like, well, if you wouldn't there, then why are you doing it here? And I think a lot of that is around just setting the standards for what is appropriate sort of live stream. But yeah, I mean, has anyone tackled those kind of privacy related challenges in their school, Jon or Kim particularly?
I think that one of the things which has really helped all schools that are using G Suite is when this all kicked off is that Google made the premium features of Enterprise readily available to everyone. So one of the things that we're trying to avoid is a one-to-one chat. However, but in certain circumstances where that can't be avoided, then we're making sure that with the students' knowledge that it's being recorded. And we're also making use of the audit, which is available through the admin console, which actually tracks movement in and out of rooms. And that's just a really nice feature. And it's a nice level of reassurance. And we're also really pleased now the way that Meets is going, in that once the teacher, as long as the teacher is the last person to leave, that students are no longer going to be able to just jump back into that Meet.
Yeah.
But I think that where people do have any possible concerns, that certainly that the responsiveness of the team at Google for Education has been really, really strong. So I definitely urge people to do that. And I think that where there's weight behind a certain demand and a certain feeling of things that could be improved, then things are happening really quickly.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, good call out as well. I mean, we are obviously sort of more in tune with Google for Education and the team, and the Google Meets team have been working 24 hours a day since the COVID situation landed. Obviously, the numbers using Google Meet has gone very, very high, and you may see some of the tweets from Sundar and other people at Google sort of talking about those numbers. But they've really worked incredibly hard to listen to the teachers' use cases and reply to that. So you've had the creating a nickname hangout. So you go to meet.google.com, you can create a nickname meet, and using that link, you can then join. And if you're the last one out, no one else can join afterwards. And that was something that teachers were asking for. There's also now the ability that only the creator of a meet can admit external people to the meet, which was dealing with one issue that came up. It's also possible now to create a meet directly from Classroom. So all of those types of features. And I think it's fair to say, if you keep an eye on the G Suite updates blog over the coming weeks, you will see some more features being launched this week and in preparation for when a lot of us will kick off the next term or semester as well. So a lot of companies have been working really hard. And you'll notice that I've just put up a comment from Jon. In Europe, GDPR has been a big driver in our situation on platforms. And actually, I think Jon is a great example of a school that have put a lot of time and effort into understanding GDPR. And I would presume, and I'd really be interested to see if Jon wants to comment on this, but having prepared well for GDPR, I wonder if that has made the transition to distance learning a little bit easier. But I'll let Jon officially sort of answer that question.
Yeah.
For those who aren't part of Europe, GDPR is our data protection rules that we all subscribe to throughout Europe. So
I've noticed some envy in some cases, or not always, from stateside about GDPR. It is more stringent, but I think it puts in a lot of safeguards. So yeah, when you discover a new tool and you want to start using it in your classroom, GDPR can always be that barrier. But I think what we're all getting used to now is there's good reasons for that.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
And actually, if you are teaching within the sort of the EU, then the Chromebook App Hub now references those different apps that are that have GDPR compliance. Obviously, it's always on the school to do your due diligence if you're going to be turning on new tools for the students. And actually, one of the other things is getting that approval if you go for additional services. Okay, so we've got a comment here. I think the students behave online and treat the class the same way the teachers have set the norms.
Yeah.
I think that's so true. It's always best to have online activities within the school year. I to a certain extent, I feel like great instruction is great instruction, and teachers who've built relationships consistently will find that those relationships have served them very well in the transition from classroom to online learning from home.
Yeah, and I think it's also a good wake-up call for everybody, because we sort of knew that we were supposed to teach our kids about digital citizenship and all the norms for behaving online, but many schools sort of didn't go through it. They didn't reinforce this. So now we are sort of reaping the harvest for that. So I think this is also a good wake-up call for us for the future from now onwards.
And that was where I was going to wrap this up, is we're obviously talking about the situation we've been forced into. I think what we're getting to now is, now that a number of countries have been in lockdown situations for a little while now, is we're starting to think about, well, what happens when we go back? Going back won't be a one-off thing. I think it's going to be back and forth. But what are those things that you're going to keep? The new discoveries, the new ways of working that are going to last beyond this situation. And I don't know if you've seen the comment. There's a tweet, I think, where it's, what was the biggest driver to your digital transformation? Was it your policy, your principle, or was it COVID-19? And I think in a number of cases, yeah, it's been a big driver for change. Actually, I deliver a lot of design thinking sessions, and when I wanted to try and get people, particularly educators, thinking a bit differently and sort of outside the box, I always used to throw in this real curveball, which was, here's an idea for you. What if we close all schools and only teach online? Oh, so we've done that now. So that's no longer innovative at all. Which kind of leads us into our sessions now. And obviously, we didn't get a chance to talk in depth about supporting teachers, but hopefully we're doing a bit of that in a moment. But yeah, any comments around teachers having the skills? And Ida's already brought this up in the comments. We now have had to jump up in terms of tech skills, but be interested to hear how people are supporting those teachers who feel less confident with tech in this situation as well. But right, so we're coming up to 1/2 the hour. So what we're going to be doing now is switching over to 2 30-minute sessions with Kim. So Bogdan and Jon, I will see you later. Thank you very much for your contributions so far.
We'll still be here and help Kim if possible. So.
I'm going to be glued to this, Kim.
Oh yeah, we got support all the way. Cool. So Kim, you're going to be kicking off with collaborative Jamboard and then into PearDeck. Just to give people a bit of an overview of those two sessions, what are the key things you're looking to share?
I think it's good that people know that it's not a how-to session, so I'm not going to go through and start you from the beginning of Jamboard and how you use it and which are these tools. It's more focused around how, if you already know how to use it, what are some applications that you could use it for with distance learning and beyond distance learning as well. There's plenty of stuff out there about how to use the tool and what the different pieces and components are, so that's easy to find, but I think more about what you can do with it and why you might like to try it. So that's what I'm going for with that one. And the same with PearDeck. You may not be familiar with the tool, and again, there's loads out there about how to use it, but this will more be about what you can do with it, and especially in a distance learning context.
Awesome and tremendous. Right,
right.
I'll let you sort of share your screen, and then we can get into that first session.
Okay.
If there's any key questions, I'll try and pop those up for you and just highlight them for you as we go. Excellent.
Let me just get my screen sharing on.
Can we all just give a shout out for Kim's banner in the background?
Handmade, man. Handmade. Dedication. All
cool.
right.
All ready?
I am ready.
Okay, so I'll pass over to you, Kim.
Okay.
Have a great session and let me know if you need anything at all.
Yeah, and if there's questions that pop up, Ben, just let me know because I can't see the questions at this point. So, okay. So Jamboard is, I'm going to leave it in this view here as well. Jamboard is a collaborative whiteboard that's got tons of great features for you. You can change backgrounds, you can have images. It has integration with Google Drive, and I'll show you how that feature could be used as well. Has some handwriting recognition, auto draw of images. So if you're drawing a little boat, it will actually detect that you're drawing a boat and turn it into an icon for you. Sticky notes, you can have multiple slides, and the best part about it is it's collaborative, and it's free because it's part of the G Suite. So it has some really cool advantages for using in this context right now. So let's have a look at some of the ways you can do that. One thing I've noticed is kids get really excited about it. So as with a lot of new tools, it's great to let them have some time to play with it before you actually expect them to use it in a lesson. They need to explore all of those tools and get familiar and really have a good play. Another top tip is you can use it to make a template. So versus giving them something that's completely blank, if you want them to work with a graphic organizer, for instance, you can actually preload that into the Jamboard before you share it to the students. So that template is already there for them to work with. Or if there's questions or brainstorming that you want them to do, you can add in any kind of a background or something there that they're going to work with versus just having a blank slate. You can assign and share it out to small groups. I'm going to go over that at the end with how you can push it out to Classroom. And then you can also manage it a little bit better by, just like you would with Google Slides. If you're going to open a slide deck for your whole class, you'd most likely designate certain slides for certain kids or for students. Similar to that, you'd want to do that in this program as well, if you want multiple kids to be working within it, just to keep things organized for you and for them. I'm going to jump over onto my iPad right now just to show you quickly this one feature. Using items from Drive is really, really cool. It can have slides, docs, and PDFs. You can annotate those, and I'm going to show you that quickly with my, my iPad. So just one sec. I'm hoping you're seeing my iPad right now. And so here, this tiny little thing right here is actually a slide deck from Google Slides. And when I expand that, I can see all of the slides in that deck. And I can pull out those slides individually. So this is a map. And if I pull that out, I can put it right onto this screen. And then, if I make that guy smaller, I could pull it onto a new slide, or I can make it bigger. I could even get rid of this slide deck here if I wanted to, so that it's not here anymore, and just have this slide by itself. That would give me the ability, if I'd shared that out to students and I wanted them to annotate different slides, versus just having note-taking in the bottom of a slide deck. If they're using it in Jamboard, different slides, I could have them annotate on there as I'm working, or as I've already shared it with them. They'd be able to write, they'd be able to add notes themselves or explain something there. So that's just one cool feature that I think Jamboard has that some of the other whiteboard apps don't have. I'm going to go out of here and go back onto my presentation. I've seen lots of people use it for math and for problem solving. So you could, again, preload that with the questions. I just did it on sticky notes, but you could actually have images of those problems that you want the kids to solve. And then per slide, you can assign that slide or that frame to a student, or the whole thing to one student for them to solve. And then you'd be able to see everything collaboratively as they're working. It has shape recognition as well. So you can, as you're drawing shapes, if you're using it for geometry or something, it's also got a grid or a graph background if you want to use that for math. And again, you'll be able to see that if it's shared out to the students, you'll be able to see that straight away as they're working. Another great way to use it is for sketchnoting or mind maps or note-taking. So if you just import in a background or some sort of graphic organizer that you want them to use. So this is just a really simple, quick Venn diagram, 2-circle. I didn't draw those circles. I imported that as an image. And then kids could collaborate on that. So maybe this was a novel and they're talking about the characteristics of those characters and what's similar and what's different and what they share. So it's a nice way for students to collaborate together on one whiteboard. And using it then for sketchnoting or graffiti walls, mood boards, because you can do so much with it, you can draw and import things, create icons, do all sorts of stuff. You could use it for all kinds of gathering up of ideas, or like a mood board, similar like a Pinterest board, basically, where they could be gathering all kinds of different things all in one spot and commenting on them. And it has the ability to have multiple, they call it frames, but think of it as like slides. So there's multiple pages within each one, so they can continue to add on to that as well. So this was just a quick brainstorm. You could use it as a pre-assessment or for them to gather and collect notes about a topic as well. And another idea is having it as a discussion board. So it's a little bit similar to a Padlet, I suppose. This idea is from EdTech Emma, and she's created a template for it. So each of these notes, the kids would click on their note for their number and then write their points right onto those little Post-it notes. And then at the end, you'd have all of that gathered together. So quite similar to a Padlet. But you could, again, then move on from there onto other frames within this. And when you're going to share your jam, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do that. So you could, you can use it in Classroom. So if I go and share it into Classroom, I can attach it here to the assignment, give them some instructions, and then instead of assigning it to, I can assign it to all students if I want. And I could either make a copy for each student, or if I wanted to share it to particular groups of students. So maybe I have a group of 4 and they're going to work on one, and I want another group to work on a different one or the same one, but only in that group of 4. I can create different assignments for different groups. So instead of all students, I don't have a lot of students in this class, but I'd want to untick this and assign it to only particular students and make sure then that they can edit that file. That way, when I assign it, I can have different Jamboards for different groups to work collaboratively on. You can also, right from Jamboard, you can add students and share it out directly from Jamboard. So you don't have to put it into Classroom. You can just automatically, just like you share any document within G Suite, you can share it there. Jamboards can export out as a variety of different forms. So you could export it as a PDF. So the entire Jamboard can export as a PDF. Or you can take individual frames and export them as JPEGs. That would give you the ability then to utilize that stuff anywhere else that you could use a JPEG. So maybe you want to put those then into Google Slides, and you could use them then in Google Slides, which is basically what I did here to create this slide deck for you. These are just, I exported them as JPEGs and put them into here. So it gives you some flexibility to move in and out of the tool, use it in Jamboard, and then put it into other pieces, other G Suite tools as well, for you to be able to use it and the kids to be able to use it again as well. I don't know how many of you have ever tried it with students before, but they really, really do enjoy it. And teachers are finding at our school that that it's been really great for distance learning because they are missing that whiteboard experience and the ability to either teach it live and explain things to students or use it like I was just saying, so that groups of students are collaborating together and then being able to share that back with the teacher. So it has a lot of different uses. And again, I'm not going to go through all of the tools and the how-tos on each part. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just see if there's any questions that people have.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of sharing about people that are referencing the web version versus the app. So there are some differences there in terms of the functionality that's available through the iOS or Android app. There were some good call outs for pushing the Android app out to Chromebooks. So schools using Chromebooks, you can push that. Now, there were a couple of questions about sort of getting that. So for anyone asking, like through the admin console, you can push the Jamboard app out to users. So automatically installs on their Chromebooks as soon as they sign in. So that's something you can do. And also just a reference that Jamboard is one of the core G Suite apps. So it comes under the kind of core agreement and therefore GDPR compliance in terms of data processing and all those kind of things. But yeah, any questions that people want me to jump out? I'll see if I can bring them up.
There are differences between, I can talk about the differences between the app and the web version. The web version has less features. And you're much better off using the app, either Android app or the iOS app or on Chromebooks having it. It obviously is nice when you've got a pen or the ability to draw as well without your finger. That definitely adds some usability to it that you don't have if you're trying to use the trackpad, which is why I love the app version of it, because that's where you can do the drawing recognition, the shape recognition, the handwriting recognition, and we've got a user here saying, or a person saying that they've used it with languages, because you're not subject to having all these different keyboards and different things that kids can write in different languages because they're actually just handwriting, and then it's recognizing that handwriting that they're doing, or they can leave it as just handwriting, which is great. It's a pretty open-ended tool and super easy to use. The kids get it right away.
Yeah, I think I was already excited about. I think they've turned it on. It will be pushed out, and then in the next few hours, and they're ready to go. So, I think all your tips are appreciated.
And I know there's a lot of other whiteboard apps out there, but I think some of the benefits of this are the direct Drive integration. So throwing your slides into there or a PDF that you've used, and then pulling out those pages and being able to annotate and write and explain right there is a really cool feature. And the fact that it's free. I know other tools, there's a subscription involved, and they might do some more things than what this one does, but you could combine this with Screencastify, for instance, or you could combine it with other things if you wanted to integrate like a recording tool with that as well. So it is free, and it's got some really great tools attached to it to be able to use.
There was a little bit of a couple of questions about how you managed to get your iPad to show. So am I right in thinking that was Reflector you were using?
Yes, I use Reflector with my iPad directly. So it's a piece of software on my laptop that allows me to connect iOS devices to my laptop.
And I think also where you imported it to slides, there was a question, is that from iPad only or laptop as well? That's just through Google Drive, right? That's just the connection through Google Drive, whatever device you're on.
Yes, it works on the app, because on the app I can go back on the app and just show you quickly. So on the app, you've got this plus tool here, and that's where you've got then Drive content you can see.
You'll need to share your screen back up again. Sorry, Kim.
Sorry. It's fancy for a minute, now I'm not.
Caught you out.
Yeah. Here we go.
There you go.
Okay. So this plus sign on the app version, and again, that's the Android app or on a Chromebook or on iOS. You've got then Drive content, and then it's going to open up your Google Drive so that you can see anything that's in there that you'd want to drag in. So this, again, was just a slideshow over here. And there's a whole bunch of other things that you have. You don't have the stickers, and you won't have Drive content on the regular web version. You'll get the sticky notes. You don't get the handwriting recognition. So there's a lot of features that you get with the app version that you won't get with the web version. You can still see all of these. So if I create these in the app version, I can still see all of the things I made. Those things don't go away if I open it on the web. So those are still there. And that really cool handwriting tool and handwriting recognition, shape recognition. And like I said, the drawing tool is quite cool. So if I go in here and I draw a ship, you can see down at the bottom, it starts to say, oh, it looks like you're drawing a boat. So are any of these boats kind of what you were going for? Because yours isn't very good. And I can click on that and really quickly get some really nice icons to add. So that makes it really cool for doing infographics, especially with younger children who can't handle maybe a more sophisticated infographics program. But this gives them a way to graphically and visualize some of the ideas as well, because it's really quick to do that drawing, and it's amazing what it can recognize and really quite fun. Again, that's why I said the kids really need some time to play with it before you expect them to use it for something serious, because there's a lot of fun to be had in there. And then that handwriting recognition tool as well. So it's pretty easy. You can draw right on there and immediately it turns that into text, and all of that can be resized and moved around. And then that shape tool as well. So if I draw a circle, it will turn it into a proper circle or a right triangle and so on. So it's really, really cool. Lots of uses. It's super open-ended, and I love open-ended tools like that, where you're not restricted to just one subject area. Really kind of the world is yours with a whiteboard app like this. I'll go out of my screen sharing again.
Yeah, so we had a question from Ida around the student collaboration. Mm-hmm. Let me just come out of... Sorry, I should have switched that. So I had a question from Ida. So Jamboard live collaboration with students, if they're on their Mac laptops, kind of how have you used it in that way?
Yeah, well, they're going to be limited then to what they've got on their screen. If you have more features, they'll see that on the Jamboard. They themselves won't be able to use those features, but they'll see what you're doing if you're using it from an app. And they could also join in from a phone if they've got phones, which most kids seem to have.
Undoubtedly. Also, I mean, I've done a lot of collaborations on Jamboard with people without the app, where we just use the Post-it note feature for sharing ideas and doing kind of brainstorm activities. Yeah. So I've used that quite a lot, and I think I find the Post-it notes is a nice way to organize people. So obviously, when you're using a collaborative Google document, you often use a table to say, right, give everybody a place for their collaboration just as they get started. So that might be a useful way to structure it. If you're just getting started, is just having that people familiar with the Post-it note option. So that might be a nice way to get started. There's some good conversation going on about using it. And also, I think a call out for Bogdan's session later, there was a mention of Equatio. Yep. For using it for maths. Yes, I did put an S on the end of that. And then Bogdan will be talking about Equatio later on in his second form sessions, I believe. So look out for that if you want to specifically look at some sort of maths and science uses. Cool. Oh, I just hey, this is one for Bogdan, Kim, and Jon. I was talking about the AI tool that you're using, and just finished a course with ISTE on AI. So I think you can we're full on ISTE affiliates. So we always like that to see that one. Cool. Right, Kim, shall I pass back to you? Feel free to share your screen for the remainder of the time. And what I'll try and do next time is though that I can remove your screen when you need to, save you having to reshare every time. That's my job. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking through the questions. Again, I went through that pretty quickly, much more quickly than I anticipated. But I don't know if other people have got any other ways that they might have seen it used to collaborate. I've seen so many different ways, even with higher level maths without Equatio, but still, since you're doing the drawing right on there, it's taking that piece that Equatio would take. Obviously, Equatio is beautiful, but you'll find out more about that with Bogdan. But because you can draw right on the screen, it gives you that ability, depending on how well you can handwrite, how clear it is, to see those more difficult equations on the Jamboard as well.
Because you don't have a physical like Jamboard
Nope.
In the school, do you? So that's not a step you've needed to take to make the most out of the tool.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, really just, and especially in this situation where we're distance learning, that wouldn't really come into play too much. It's nice to just have it on a tablet or on your laptop to be able to draw. And again, create that template ahead of time. If there's things you definitely want them to fill in, then fill that up with the things you want, with those images, or like the Venn diagram or the graphing paper or whatever it is that you want, so they can fill it in from there.
We also had a reference here to great for taking photos of student work and then getting the class to kind of peer assess. So
great idea. Yeah, great idea. And again, you could use that for importing things from Google Drive. So different kids on their particular frame could import something in from their Google Drive to share on their frame that everybody else would be able to see and then comment and annotate on. Yes, you can do that in slides, but then you'd be using that formal commenting piece on the side, which this could do that in a much more informal way, I think, and certainly more accessible for obviously being able to draw and write on the screen, which makes it really easy.
So here we've had be great to show my maths teachers. So this brings us into that training piece around the rest of the teachers. I imagine a lot of people on this today will be thinking about how they take some of these gems and share them out. So I know you showed me a great Google Classroom related distance learning video. So I don't know, maybe we can, anyone's got some good ones, they can put them in the chat, but we can source out the best examples of that. I know for a fact that all the best G Suite related tips and tricks videos are on the AppsEvents YouTube channel produced by SETI. So feel free to subscribe if you want to keep up with any of the new ones coming out about that. But yeah, any good Jamboard videos you're aware of? I'm sure we can pick a few out.
I definitely have some. And on the resources slide of my slide deck, which how are they getting access to that slide deck, Ben?
So we'll be sharing a sort of resources folder in the follow-up. And there'll be a post coming out on the mailing list. So if people want to sign up to the mailing list, then there'll be resources based on everything that we're doing today that they can get access to, the slide decks, resources, links, and things like that.
The last slide of my deck has a whole page of resources. So I've linked out to, I wish I remembered his name. I think it's Mike Mulvaney. He has, Tom Mulvaney. He has 51 videos all about Jamboard. Not only the how-to of all of the tools, but how to actually utilize those in a whole bunch of different ways. So he's got some amazing videos. I don't need to make any because he's made 51 of them. They're phenomenal. So I linked to his YouTube playlist on the last slide of my deck. And I also gave you a bunch of other YouTube videos that I linked to with other people's tutorials and some different questions, specific questions that people often have about, can it do this? How do I do that? So that's all there.
Yeah, big Tom Mulvaney. We were fortunate enough to work with him when we were doing the ISTE experience for Google for Education. And he was on the Jamboard for us. So his Jamboard knowledge is exceptional. So yeah, search out any Tom Mulvaney videos and we'll put you've got those in the slides anyway. So there's a great call out as well. Awesome and tremendous. Okay, so do we have any more questions coming up? Do teachers have control regarding the content students would bring to the collaborative environment?
No.
So a question from Paul.
No, that's a digital citizenship piece then at the end. So if kids are deciding to be inappropriate with it, I mean, at the end of the day, it's shared collaboratively, so it's not going to be a mystery really who's doing what. But then we need to address that as more of a classroom management issue. I think if kids are choosing to do silly things on there and put silly things on other people's slides. You have the same issue if you're using Google Slides as well. Again, with the document history, you can go back and see who did what. But yeah. back down to classroom management.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously some settings around sharing settings for students, whether they can share out with their domain or not, and that you could decide to look at if you particularly want to have a look at it. But I think, yeah, just good habits, talking about best practices and those norms that were mentioned earlier.
Yep.
Is a great way to go. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So in terms of Jamboard, I think we've got a few people keen to get going, keen to share it with their math teachers and various things.
Good. Someone's asking, Ben, where do they sign up for the mailing list?
Oh, I can put that back up. So the mailing list, there's a link here that should appear on the screen below. So you can sign up to the mailing list using that bit.ly link. That will take you straight to the place where you can sign up for the mailing list. And what I'll also do is I'll put that into the chat as well if before anyone beats me to it.
And someone just asked me about Reflector. Yes, it's a paid tool, but I think it's only $10 per person. So if you're a teacher on your own, it's really inexpensive to just get a license for it.
Cool. Okay.
Tom's YouTube channel, that's on the last slide of the deck. So when you subscribe, you'll get access to the slide deck. The last slide has a whole page of different resources on it. So I filled it up with a whole bunch of different things for you.
Yeah, we'll be doing a follow-up via the mailing list with sort of links to both of the live sessions that we've done today, the resources from the speakers, and just some other information that everyone shared. So feel free to sign up to that to make sure you get a hold of all of those things. And obviously this will be available on YouTube from here on, and we can look out for some more of those too. I don't know if anyone wants to, Kim, if you want to take a little breather before your next session when we get into PearDeck.
I'm good.
And we'll just give people a moment to sort of stretch their legs a little bit. Here's a bit of good distance learning practice as well, giving a bit of a... It's funny, isn't it? The same way you would do in an in-person training is right now we'd be like, look, you want to go and grab some water? Yeah, do you want to stretch your legs? Have a little bit of a chat in between. And I've been on a few video calls where maybe the practices that you have in person weren't entirely followed. so give everyone a chance to sort of share a few things. I'm just going to spend a bit of time looking through some of the comments. Really want to sort of thank everyone for sharing. So Ida, thank you for your questions. And Kim, there's a big thank you. Thank you to Darren for picking up a load of questions. So Darren's a very experienced school leader. School uses G Suite. He's also got a great Facebook group for support staff using G Suite. So Darren, feel free to sort of share that as well, because I think one of the things that people forget when they go down the G Suite route is the wider school who have to use those tools as well. And Darren's definitely one of the advocates for the sort of hidden work behind a school in the office. There's been Amy just sort of looking at weighing up her options around Equatio using Jamboard and sharing that with the maths teachers. Let's see what else we've got. Oh, we've got some feature suggestions. It would be awesome if Jamboard incorporated some maths tools. I've heard that a lot. So I used to use Smart Notebook a lot, which did have a kind of great protractor compasses. Actually, on my YouTube channel, which has gone a bit dormant, one of the most viewed videos was using a pair of compasses to do constructions, because I got really fed up with teaching that live in the classroom. So I just gave them all videos to watch. My first use of the flipped classroom. Excellent. A few people are saying that their mouse writing skills aren't up to scratch. So
yeah, it really is. The tool really works the best. And I've actually, some people actually plug in like a small tablet, like a Wacom or a Bamboo tablet. We have a set of those at our school that can be checked out. So a USB into your laptop, and then it's about this big. It gives you a little pen so that you can avoid using the trackpad, because it is really hard to write with the trackpad or with a mouse. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, is anyone good at that?
No.
That's got to be a special skill if you can write effectively with a mouse. If you can do that, please feel free to share, and we'll put it to the test. Maybe sort of share out a collaborative Jamboard link so you can prove it. Cool.
I've got somebody, our biggest problem is how to give quizzes where students can't cheat. I'm going to recommend that, I'll send the link to Bogdan. I have someone who's given you 5 ways to prevent kids from cheating on Google quizzes. And I'm hoping Bogdan will also address those, but I will throw that link out to him. There's some really, really, really clever ways to make sure that kids aren't cheating if it's not on locked mode.
I was going to say, like, ideally you've got managed Chromebooks.
Exactly.
And it's such a breeze.
And if you don't, there's some ways to avoid that as well.
Actually, in terms of having a kind of set space for some ordered collaboration and guidance, I'd imagine there's a tool like, I don't know, PearDeck maybe, that would be really useful for that.
Yep, we're just going to look at that now.
Cool. Keep the questions coming. Myself, obviously Bogdan's answering a lot of them, and Kim can pick up a few extra ones once she's finished her PearDeck session. But we're now ready to transition into PearDeck.
Yep.
We had a question here, actually. Any resources for ICT primary? So Kim, you kind of spread across that middle school age range, don't you? So
I do primary and middle school at my school. So yes, loads of resources. And a lot of some of our younger kids, obviously our kids don't have Google accounts when they're younger. So one of the tools we can use is PearDeck. So that is, I'm going to show that in just a minute. Not too long ago, they opened up PearDeck so that you can use it without a Google login, which makes it accessible to littles, to younger kids as well. It removes their names, so you won't necessarily know who is in there and who's on the slides. And I have some tips for how you can know who's on the slides if you're using it without Google logins. The Google login is giving you back as the teacher, you know who's logged in. But we're going to go on to that in just a second.
Cool. Okay, I think time is right for switching to PearDeck. So as and when you're ready, feel free to share. All
right. Again, I'm going to leave my screen. I'm not going to present full screen on my slides because I want to show you a few things on the side here. And all right.
Okay.
There you go, Ben. Thank you.
Over to you.
Okay. So if you are not familiar with PearDeck, they are currently offering their services, their premium services for free. It is a free add-on for slides. And let's go back up here. It's a big delay on my laptop right now. So it makes all of your Google slide decks interactive. It's a slides add-on. Basically, you can take any presentation and add levels of interactivity to it so that every kid in the class can be participating with you along in the lesson. You can run that asynchronously or you can run it synchronously. So I could teach that live physically in the classroom with kids in the classroom on their devices, or obviously now in a distance learning situation, you could run that live with the students or set it up so that it's in a self-guided student mode. So both of those things can be really useful. They have tons and tons of different options and pre-made slide templates for you, or you can design your own. All kinds of different things. You can embed a website. We're going to talk about all of those features. And it's connected to lots of other services. So they've got partnerships with several other services that let you utilize them inside of PearDeck. So again, it's an add-on for Google Slides. And when you go up, right there, open PearDeck. Sorry, this is very slow. I have teenagers in this house, so I'm estimating that they are most likely.
What's their game of choice at the moment?
Yeah, I think they're sucking all the Wi-Fi right now. Here we go. Open PearDeck.
If you prioritize the Wi-Fi to your own device, I presume you'd get a couple of visitors very quickly, right?
Yes. All right, so this is what it looks like on the side if you're not familiar with it. Loads of different, like I said, templates that they've created. They also have an amazing connection with Google and the Google's Internet Awesome digital citizenship curriculum. So that's all here, pre-made PearDeck lessons all about digital citizenship connected with Internet Awesome from Google. Here's all the tools you can use to create your own slides. Text slides, free choice, numbers. I'm going to talk later about how you can embed different websites within slides. Drawing and draggable. The stars next to those indicate that those are premium features. And like I said, they are offering during this distance learning time free subscriptions for premium for schools for 90 days. And if you have a look in the template library, they have all kinds of things already ready to go. So they've got beginning of lessons, all sorts of different things. All of these are customizable. So if you like what you see and you want to change the wording on there, you can. So what did you learn from your homework? Questions your classmates might have, or what do you want to wonder about today's topic? All sorts of ways to get lessons started. During the lesson, assessments, activities, and then some exit tickets and reflections and ways to pull it all together at the end. They also have some social emotional learning slides, critical thinking. They've even got some Project Zero stuff inside their critical thinking ones. Example questions. They have special slides made for younger students, math, science, social studies, etc. So they've been really building up their library and repertoire of pre-made slides for teachers. And because they're all customizable, you can really just use that as a starting point and jump off from there and creating and customizing your own slides in PearDeck. Let's go back over here. I'm going to close that. Oh, this is getting really slow. Sorry. All right. So PearDeck.com, stay connected is their address to get free 90-day premium access, if that's something you're interested in looking at for your school. It does give you several advantages, some of the more tools that are available. And one of the key things that makes available is called takeaways. And I'm going to go over and explain that in just a few minutes. So one of the best things about it is that every student is involved versus when you're doing those presentations and you're kind of not sure if all the kids are really listening or not or engaged. This gives you a whole bunch of stopping off points to check in with students. You can use it for formative assessment in any kind of a lesson where you really just want to check in with the kids versus kids just raising their hand and you picking on a couple of kids. This means that every single student is engaged with that question or with that activity and giving you information about how well they're doing, basically. And you can see as the teacher what they understand, where you maybe need to stop, back up, reteach. Or if everybody's got it, you can move on. There's also some sort of just check-ins with the kids. How are you doing? Do you understand this? What questions do you have at this point? And there's always those kids who don't want to answer that question or who are shy in a classroom setting. And this gives everybody the chance then to have a voice. I'm going to go over several of these things on here today. So like I said, there's a synchronous or there's a self-paced mode, which in the distance learning environment can be really, really useful to open up that self-paced mode so the kids can go through the slides at their own pace. There's a power-up extension as well, which we'll go over. And let's just get going here onto the slides. I just talked about the template gallery. So all of those, you can change every single piece on there. So you can see this box here, you can change the text. They have some really nice images that they've created. If you don't want this friend to be true or false, you can change what's on those buttons. And you'll see at the bottom, it creates this, this little pair at the bottom that tells you that that's a PearDeck slide where the kids have the opportunity then to respond in whatever way you've chosen. If it's free response, if it's drawing on there, typing on there, dragging icons around, whatever it might be, it will tell you at the bottom that that is a PearDeck slide when you see that pair on the bottom. The student paced mode, the kids can go through the slides in any speed that they wish to. When you're running it as the teacher in a synchronous mode, the kids, you advance the slides for them. You decide when they stop responding. You can shut their slides and then you control when they move on to the next slide. So that's useful when you're teaching live, obviously. But you could also use that in distance learning and do a short lesson, an intro piece maybe, where you're introducing something to the students, and then you could move it on to student-paced mode so that after you've done your introduction, the kids can go through the rest of the deck on their own. And you'll see all of their responses. And like I said at the beginning, if the kids have logged in with Google, then you know which responses belong to which student. So it's easy for you to see on your teacher dashboard at the end who said what. At any time, you can check into those answers. You don't have to wait for it to be finished. You can check into their answers and see how they're responding and what they're understanding. Lots of ways to mark the work as well. So there's a list of all of their answers. You can go back into the slides and see their answers. And you can also export them out even to a Google Sheet so that you can see all their answers in one place. So there's lots of advantages. And that's not just with the student pace mode, that's in general. But once the kids have finished with it, or you've finished with that presentation, then you can go in and start to look at what their answers were. Or like I said, you can look at it live and adjust your teaching as needed. If you keep the session open and everybody's finished with it, then you will get the takeaways. And that's one of the paid features. The takeaways gives you every single student's answers in a Google Doc. And the really cool thing about that, underneath each response, so it shows what your slide was, it shows what their response was, and underneath it also gives them a space to take notes. So that document is immediately shared with the student. And you, as the teacher, can add comments just like you can to any Google Doc. The students here can take some notes on the answers or on their reflections on that particular question. And it gives you the ability to see everybody's answers all in one document. So each student's answers in one document. And the kids then have that takeaway from the PearDeck. One of the teachers she's a PearDeck teacher, so she works with PearDeck, and she had some excellent ways that she was using the drawing tools in PearDeck actually to create answer keys. So what she does, she creates the PearDeck as a teacher, and then she goes in as a student and actually answers all of the questions and creates a takeaway for herself with the answers that then she shares back to the students. So that's a really cool way to utilize the tool to create, especially this was for AP Calculus, so this was even for higher level mathematics. She was going in and these were her answers for that particular question that she posted in the slide. And then she shares that takeaway back with the kids. So after they've already done it and they've submitted their answers, then she can go back and provide them with this answer key with more detailed explanations here. Rather than just an answer, she can actually underline things, highlight and annotate things. So she just went in as a student and did the slides herself to provide that answer key that she could then share with them as a takeaway, which is a very cool way to do that. They have recently added in PearDeck. It used to be really difficult to integrate videos into the PearDeck. When you clicked on the video or had slide animations, they didn't work. And now they've got this Power Up extension, it's called. And it looks like this up here, my top of my screen. It's a little PearDeck. It's an extension that you add, and it means that your videos and any animations that you've added into the slide, so this is a slide that had animations with these things popping up, they will appear as they're supposed to appear. But it means that you need to have this extension installed as well as the add-on for the slides. So that's really handy because it is sometimes nice to break the content down in your Google Slides with some animations, or to include and embed videos right inside of there. That's giving you the ability there to do all of those things. One of the buttons that they've added here is a website. For a long time, I always wondered, like, what does that even mean? But it actually allows you to embed websites right onto the slide, so the kids can work with it right inside of there. And lots of sites have, like Padlet, for instance, will give you an embed code, or I've got a whole list of different sites on the next slide that will actually embed right onto the slide for them to use and not have to leave the PearDeck to go somewhere else. So as long as you've got a URL or an embeddable code, you can insert the website right onto the slide, and it prompts you and walks you through how to do that when you use that question type on your slides. So I don't know if any of you know, for instance, pet simulations. So I'm going to show that on the screen right now. This is a site with all kinds of interactive simulations for math and science, all kinds of things that you can integrate right onto a PearDeck slide and then ask the kids questions about that. Really, really cool. So they're just little animations that run on all kinds of different topics and ideas, and that's one of the things that goes right into when you use this website integration. You could use, for instance, the pet simulations right in there. Here's a list of some other things that will integrate into PearDeck. Kahoots can go right into there, Google Forms, Google Maps. I'm going to show you some things with Newsela in a minute. Padlet, TED videos, and then you can ask questions straight away after the videos. Sutori is a way to tell visual stories. We just looked at pet simulations. Duolingo, if you're familiar with Edpuzzle or Play Pause It, those take YouTube videos or Vimeo videos, and you can break those videos up and have questions. So that's a third-party tool, but then you can integrate those into a PearDeck slide as well, so the kids aren't leaving the PearDeck to go elsewhere to do other things. So you can kind of house a lesson all within these the slide deck, basically, and keep the kids in there. As we know, they get really distracted as soon as they leave the thing they're doing and are out on the open internet. They can get super distracted. So this kind of locks that down, keeps them within the PearDeck program. So all you need for that is the URL or embed quote. Not all websites will work, and it will tell you right away, sorry, this is not one that will work or is compatible with this. So either the URL or the embed code is what you need. And there's online, you can find some through the PearDeck website, how you actually can figure out the embed code if you're not sure how to find out what that is. PearDeck recently partnered up with Newsela, and Newsela is a fantastic, also free tool. It's freemium, so they have a bunch of their stuff for free, and with the premium tools, you can do additional things. But it's basically daily, all kinds of different thousands and thousands of news articles on current events and other topics as well, but it's all nonfiction. And they have partnered up with Newsela to provide daily decks. So the students would be then reading an article in Newsela, and then they'll provide for you every day different articles with different questions that they've already embedded here in PearDeck slides. So I have here, I can show you what those daily decks look like. So if you're already a Newsela user or new to Newsela, this is worth investigating. Newsela is definitely a service that's worth investigating. And right here you can see they've got the big question already sorted out for you, and you go through the slides, breaks it up, what was the topic sentence, all kinds of ways to utilize the information from that article in a PearDeck slide. It's a really, really powerful tool, and I'm impressed with how many different integrations and partnerships they're developing to utilize this tool. It's one of those that's really open-ended. All kinds of subject areas can use this, and you saw I was even using it. They were using it for AP Calculus. So it goes down to littles and all the way up to our older students as well. And one of the other really fun things that PearDeck offers is called Flashcard Factory. And you access Flashcard Factory from the PearDeck website. And what it lets you do is the students are divided up into 2 teams, and it's super fun. You don't want to do this every lesson, but it is really fun, especially if you're teaching foreign languages, you've got ELL students, or maybe you're teaching science and you've got a whole range of vocabulary that you need the kids to know or learn. It's a really fun way to do it. The students are divided up into 2 teams. One team has to put the word in a sentence, and the other team is drawing a picture that goes with that particular piece of vocabulary, that word. And then at the end, they vote and decide. It goes through the flashcard factory, and the students will vote and decide which picture is the best one that matches the sentence and the word. So then they create the flashcard. The flashcards can be exported to Quizlet, or you can use something called Gimkit, which is a gamification basically with those flashcards. You can also pull in your words and definitions from a sheet, from Google Sheets, or from Quizlet directly. So lots of different opportunities there to use that. I'll just show you quickly what that looks like. So you can see here they've got you can have preset definitions that come right from the dictionary, so you're not forced to invent those, or if you want to do your own definitions, you can. But you've got a list. The kids start producing those flashcards. They're drawing a picture. One team's drawing the picture, the other team's doing the sentence, and then they get combined together here in the flashcard factory. And when you're all finished, then you push those cards out. They can be printed and again sent to Quizlet, or you can play games with them right in Gimkit if you want to. So all kinds of ways to utilize that. And the kids love it. It's really, really fun. And you can do that. You can do it live. So the kids are all contributing to that. Everybody's on different teams and doing different things. It's really, really fun way to integrate vocabulary. So I love PearDeck. Our teachers love PearDeck, and they've actually been turning to it. And I've had lots of teachers requesting some training sessions from me on how to use it, because all of a sudden they're thinking, this would be exactly what I need for distance learning right now for different subjects that they're teaching. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just check in and see if there's any questions that people have.
There was one question around student access. So do the students need to install the add-on as well?
No, because you as the teacher are doing the creating. So all they have to do, they get a code and they log in with that code. It's super simple. You can push it through Google Classroom. So the code, there's a link right there to integrate your Google Classroom, and you can push that link to Google Classroom, or it gives you the link that you can share in any other way that you want to. The kids go right to that link. There's a little code they type in, and it's super fast, and they're in right away. You can see as well which students and how many students have joined, so you'll know when to start if you're doing it live. If you're not doing it live, then you can push the code, and the students go in the self-paced mode and go through it.
And then, rather than a lot of questions, we had a lot of love for some of the resources that you shared around like PET and PlayPosit.
PlayPosit, yeah. PlayPosit is a fantastic tool. Not what my session's about, but it is anytime you're using YouTube videos and you want kids to get active with what's going on in those videos, their tendency will be to just watch it straight through and then forget half of it. So if it's more than 2 minutes long, they've forgotten most of what happened at the beginning. So both PlayPosit and Edpuzzle are tools that you can use to break up YouTube videos and insert comprehension, exactly like PearDeck in a way that you're inserting all kinds of different question types within that YouTube video to really pull kids in. And then you as the teacher have a dashboard view as well with both of those tools, Edpuzzle and PlayPosit, where you can then see what answers the kids gave and respond to those as well. So that's a really great way to make YouTube much more interactive for the students.
Yeah, we've had some call outs for Edpuzzle as well. And then there was a comment around some of the content from it being HTML and some being still Java. So there was a little discussion that went on about, is there a way to push all of their content to HTML? And Erin sort of jumped in as well with that, feel free to sort of push that from any of the providers. And I think that point goes to a lot of the resources that we use, is whether it's the question mark in the bottom left-hand corner of Classroom or all the other tools where you can provide feedback. I think there's a lot of scope for some of these providers where they're really keen to respond to feedback. So keep on pushing for those. Like Classroom integration, for example, is one of those things that's purely on the third party to code into their tool. There's no barrier from Google or Google Classroom for being able to have your tool link into Google Classroom through the back end. So that's always something we get people sort of asking, are Google going to integrate Classroom with this? It's like, well, yeah, it's down to the provider to make that choice to sort of invest a bit of time.
And it really is a golden opportunity right now to be able to try out, for these companies and for us as educators, to be able to try out some of these tools and use them. And they're offering their premium services. Now, I'm a little bit worried as the person who decides on some of these services for our school. Holy cow, what if the teachers get really used to this amazing service and then they love the premium features and then I have to pull that rug away from them? But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And actually, PearDeck, the free version of PearDeck is fantastic. There's loads of things you can do with it. And yeah, of course, the premium version has some features that are really useful as well. But Newsela is free. PearDeck is free. So there are free versions of these things. But I would take advantage right now of some of the tools that are on offer to really get your school to give them a try. And then it gives you the ability to decide which ones did we really love. And why, and how will we use them in a context where we're back in school? So some of these might be mostly useful for distance learning and not useful again. I don't know how much video conferencing I'm going to be doing after the distance learning time is over, for instance. But some of these other tools could be used anytime, anywhere, regardless of our distance learning situation when we're back live in the classroom as well. So try them out.
Well, we've got some people heading straight for some of those tools already. There's a question from Jasmine around, is there a copyright issue when you've got those YouTube videos that you're using within tools like Edpuzzle or anything else? Are there restrictions on what you can do?
No, and if there are, then that YouTube video would not import. If there's any kind of issue on something like Edpuzzle or PayPosit, I've had it where I just couldn't use that particular video, and it is most likely because it is somehow restricted in some way, either that I can't use it in Germany or that video is not allowed to be used in that way, to be remixed.
I mean, it's fair to say that as a rule of thumb, if you can use it in Germany, then the rest of us can probably use it, no problem, right? Yes,
we have very, very, very strict restrictions on usage here in Germany.
Yeah, just an interesting task if you want to get a context on that in terms of Germany is to go to Google Maps, zoom out over the whole of Europe, and then take the little yellow person and dangle it over the continent and see where the blue is. It's quite an interesting little sort of way of demonstrating how different countries are taking different approaches to what data they want to share and which they don't. Okay.
You had somebody asking about whether students can have the add-on or not. They don't have to have it in order to use PearDeck, but another really cool thing you can do is actually have students create their own PearDeck as a review for other students. So they could create the PearDeck and then share that out for other kids, which is a great way for them to do some learning and utilize the tool as well. I love it when kids create the review for other kids because it really forces them to think about what's going to be the most useful for other students. They have to be a little bit empathetic as well. So they really don't want to, they want to create something that is useful for everybody.
There's a Confucius quote, which I don't want to butcher right now live, but around sort of what makes effective learning, and definitely being the teacher helps with that. I think that's great with the tools as well, is that I remember someone asked a question, the first time you sign up to Google Classroom, if the setting is in place, you have to choose whether you're going to be a teacher or a student. And I had a number of people ask me over the years that we've been training on Classroom, what happens if a student clicks on teacher? And honestly, the worst thing that has ever happened, it was the students at one of my schools created a Google Classroom and taught all of his friends how to code in Python. So, yeah, I think some of these tools we kind of maybe hold a bit preciously as like a teacher tool, but put them in the hands of the learners. And I think you also discover some really interesting uses.
Absolutely. Yes, I didn't address, somebody's noted in the comments, I didn't address the using it with littles who don't have a Google account. So again, on the resources slide for this deck, I will put resources with some how-to videos and different things, because this wasn't supposed to be a click on this tool, do that. But when I use it with littles, they can go in and then you just have them, like someone just said there, they put their name on that slide. So if it's a write-on slide, the first thing they do is write their name and then what their answer is. So then you'll know which kids are doing what, because otherwise it's anonymous, which removes a little bit of the usability for you as the teacher.
Yeah, there's a constant battle at the moment, isn't there, between what you might normally do and obviously just making learning accessible. for particularly younger children who are at home, with parents supporting them in that login process or getting access to those things. And I think consistency, right? So any place where you can just have a bit of consistency for the parents about where they access stuff. Yeah. I know there was a session earlier today. So if you want to go back and watch the recording, if you didn't catch it this morning, of the Asia Pacific version of this, there was a session on sites. And I think kind of Google Sites is proving that one place to find that information. So that might be, here's PearDeck, here's what we're referring to, and this is a little tutorial about how you can get into that. Again, Seti did a great 30-minute session on creating video content, and did a great slide. So he has a slide that's set up like with a little X in the top right, and it looks like a browser window, which is just a lovely way to set up a collaborative slide, and sort of help people navigate that kind of space. So that was a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, we've been using Google Sites as well to provide a site for kids, for students with tutorials. So if they're stuck on how to use a particular tool that a teacher might be asking them to use, and we also did a site for teachers and put all kinds of tutorials on there. So it gave them exposure to actually how many tools they have access to, because some of the teachers really didn't know the range of tools that were out there for different things and different subjects. So the Google site was a great way to have that front end entry point for everybody to see what we had available.
Cool, awesome. There might be a few more questions in there. I know there was a little bit of a discussion that jumped up about Google Chat. I haven't been able to sort of delve into that one, but it sounds like there was a good discussion around the use of that for communication. So maybe we can pick that up later. But it just leaves me to say thank you so much, Kim, for your time and for sharing. Obviously, just a reminder, if you want to sort of continue the conversation with Kim, or you've got any follow-up questions, then please feel free to jump on Twitter and sort of directly tweet at Kim, start following, and see what she's sharing. So it's been a pleasure to work with Kim for a number of years now. An amazing tech coach teacher. So yeah, really, really a pleasure to have you on. Thank you from everyone for everything you've done so far. Awesome. Okay, so thank you to Kim. And what we'll do now is bring Bogdan back in. So Bogdan's going to be picking up the next 2 30-minute sessions on Google Forms. I think Google Forms in the classroom or out of the classroom is a massively useful tool. So I think there's lots to learn here, whether you're new to Google Forms or moving on. So thank you, Kim. I will let you go and have a little break. And and what was that? Sort of the cocktail hour. Is that
yeah.
right now? Cool. See you in a bit.
Bye.
Welcome, Bogdan. Thank you for all the effort you've been putting in the chat. Really appreciate you picking up a lot of those questions. I'm sure everyone else does too. Sorry, I just need to share this one. So thank you, Kim. Wash hands. Absolutely. I think anything we can do to back up that message is really important. Okay, so Bogdan, you've got some Google Forms sessions coming up now. What can people look forward to?
So basically, for the next hour, we'll have 2 Google Form sessions, but we have quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how we would go through the sessions. So the first session is more like an intro session, giving you some ideas of how you can use forms in the classroom, or as you said, outside the classroom, because the forms can be very useful in very many scenarios. And we'll be looking also at how to create the self-graded quizzes. I'll be giving you some tips for maybe in some cases preventing students cheating, and so on and so forth. And this will be the first part. So we'll get the basics under control, so to say. Once again, keep in mind, this is not a full-blown how-to tutorial. We would need more time for that to go in depth and explain every single thing. But I'll try to give some context and give some examples of where I would use one type of question or another, or which one works, and so on and so forth. In the second part, so in the second half an hour, we'll be looking at spicing things up in forms. I really like the Spice Girls image you've added to the slide. Now I have that Spice Up Your Forms song running in my head. So in that part, I would like to just share some more creative ways of using forms. In some cases, it's just using forms on their own. In some others, it's using forms coupled with some other tools like extensions and add-ons. You've already mentioned Equatio. I will look a bit into using images and Bitmoji, for example, in forms, and assigning differentiated tasks, or just allowing kids to create their own stories, and so on and so forth. So we'll go through some of those examples. Once again, keep in mind, it's more of a showcase of different ways of using forms, rather than going in depth and explaining every single step I went through in order to create them. Don't forget to hydrate yourself, and you've been here for a while now, so make sure you have some water nearby.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think like there are some sort of videos on the YouTube channel. So on AppsEvents has got some videos that can sort of pick up where you left off. And there's also the kind of getting started resources from Google for Education. And I'll put a link in the chat to those as well, which are a great place if you're inspired by some of the things that you see from Bogdan today. It might be that not necessarily you, but it might be something you want to share with your colleagues who are looking to add Google Forms to their repertoire of distance learning options as well. Because I find forms, I love a form, and it's everything from like a 2-question check-in that you might do just to check everyone's around, through to automating your whole school. And I think to do all of that in an hour would be obviously quite an undertaking. So if we can just whet the appetite and then provide people with the next place to go, hopefully that'll be really useful. So thank you for already sharing your screen. So what I'll do is I'll pass over to you, Bogdan.
Perfect.
Good people learn from one of our experts.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. And also going back in time, actually, if you remember, Ben, I've joined one of your forum sessions years ago in Prague at a summit, and that's how I actually got in contact with the Google world, and that's how later I became a Google for Education trainer as well, and started working with AppsEvents. So thank you once again for the inspiration, and I'm happy to be able to sort of pass it on, I hope. So as I said, this session will not be a how-to session, but still I want to show you some of the basics, especially given that I'm not sure who's in the audience. And I think it's useful for people to know at least how to use a form, how to create a basic form, and so on and so forth. So in the first part, even though it's called Google Forms 101, as I said, I'll go to some basics, but we will not spend too much time for explaining every single step. Now, having said that, let me quickly introduce myself. I am a Google for Education certified trainer. I was a science teacher. Yes, as Ben mentioned at the beginning, I am in love with my Chromebook, but I want to talk a bit about this photo, and not the photo itself so much, but the period in which it was taken, basically. So that was more or less around the time when I started using the Google Suite. And Google Forms is the tool that made me fall in love with the Google Suite. And I want to share this because I think it's important to have the right mindset when we use tools. And that applies also to Google Forms, because the most common uses for Google Forms that I see online are just creating forms for collecting data and forms for quizzes. And that's what most teachers stick to. But you can use them for so many different other purposes if you actually include them into a bigger process. You look at the end goal in mind. And that's why I started from this photo, because in this period, I was struggling with my kids. Basically, long story short, the students were streamlined, so to say, based on the grades from the previous year. I will not go into the whole discussion about that and what happened. Bottom line is I chose the bottom group, who, by the way, were informed that they are in the bottom group. So they started already from the beginning of the school year with the idea that, hey, we were told that we are in the bottom group, so what's the point? We are stupid, there's no point in trying, and so on and so forth. So I was literally struggling, trying to get them on board, getting over this idea that they are not worth it, they cannot do it, they are stupid, they are in the bottom group, and so on and so forth. So I was trying to break this narrative in their heads. And of course, as a teacher, you can tell this to your kids as much as you want. You can repeat it, hey, that's not true, that's not the case, and you're not stupid, and so on and so forth. The kids will always say, yeah, but you're my teacher. That's what you're supposed to tell me. So that's where I was struggling. I was literally struggling. So that's when I started using Google Forms and self-graded quizzes. And I had a deal with them. I said, hey, let's do this. From now on, I will not tell you that you're not stupid. You don't have to listen to that. You don't have to listen to me telling you this. But let's do this. For the next 3 weeks or a month, After every single science lesson, I will give you a self-graded quiz or a self-graded form. You will fill it in on your way home or at home or whenever after the lesson. You'll get your grades and you decide for yourself if you are stupid or not. And lo and behold, after 3-4 days of doing this, they were like, hey, actually, I understand what we are talking about and I know how to answer the questions. So maybe I'm not stupid. Maybe he's not just trying to convince me I'm not stupid. Maybe I'm not. So that's only when we actually managed to move forward, and I actually could start working with them like I would normally do. And I'm just so grateful for Google Forms showing up in my life, so to say, in that period, because I am aware of the fact that what made it work was the instant feedback. Kids could see their results immediately. And also the fact that it was so easy to use. They could do it on a phone or on their computer at home or wherever. So this is basically just the starting point. And as I said, that's how I started. That's why I wanted to share this this small story, the short story, and also remind you of the fact that this is not the case only for forms, but any other tool out there. Make sure that you start using the tool with the right mindset, especially nowadays when we go to this crisis situation and we are bombarded with free tools left and right. Try to focus on the end learning goal and then choose the tools that are actually suitable for that. So there are different ways of using it. So of course you can collect data. You can use it for surveys, for RSVPs, for evaluation, feedback forms, data entry, quizzes, and so on and so forth. Like Darren mentioned, you could use it for the GCSE option process. It simplifies that a lot. Support staff can use them for sign-up forms, or let's say uniforms, sizes, and whatnot, and field trips, and so on and so forth. So literally, you can use them for everything and anything. And just to show you how forms work, just in case there's somebody in the audience that hasn't used the Google form so far, if you can just follow this link or type it in the new browser tab, bit.ly/AETS form. So that stands for AppsEvents Teacher Summit form. They are case sensitive, and actually what I'll do is I will also copy the link and I will paste it in the actual YouTube chat. So if that makes it easier, oh, thank you. I see that it's already posted. So as I said, this is just a simple example of a form, and if some of you can jump in and fill it in, that would be great. But what I want to show you is, while people are doing this, it's basically what are the different components for a Google form and how it actually works. So what you see here on my screen is basically my editing interface for the form. This is where I add my questions. This is where I change the possible answers. This is where I literally design my form from scratch. Now, this is one component of the forms. The second component is the live version of the form. So this is what I've sent you, or this is where you would have landed if you followed the link in the YouTube chat or on the screen. So basically, this is where you can actually go and fill in the form. This is what my students would see, or this is what the parents would see if I would send them the link. And then all of the responses, as you see, are automatically collected in the forms interface, which is a really neat way of actually having an overview of the data. So this gives me a really good insight on, first of all, who's in the room. So this is the first example of using forms, right? I could use them as a check-in activity, because we were talking earlier also at the beginning, okay, how do we create check-in activities for the students? How do we know that they are there now when kids are not physically in school, right? You could easily create a Google form, check-in activity, record their names and some other things, ask them some things about their day, and so on and so forth. What you'll see is, once again, that the results are updated in real time. I also see a quick overview of the data. So as that there are some people that are newer to Google Forms or not so confident in their skills as well in the audience, which gives me a lot of useful insights as a trainer or as a teacher during the school day. Also, talking about well-being, that's why I've included actually this question. I've changed my form after the intro session when we were talking a bit about well-being. This is also one way of getting some input from the students, not only in terms of their skills and how confident they are in using a tool or checking their understanding or whatnot, but I can also get some input regarding their state. How are they feeling, right? And then if I see that somebody is badgerlicious, I might want to go and talk to them and say, hey, tell me how to do that. I want that as well. Or if somebody's scared, I can go and approach them and say, hey, what's happening? Are you scared because you don't understand what's happening? Are you scared because something's happening in real life outside school? And then I can get in touch with the school counselor and ask for support, and so on and so forth. So these are just some simple examples. Now, just the third component, I would say, you can add also on this whole idea is working with the data you collect. So by default, the data is collected in the Google Forms directly, as you see, but you can also create a spreadsheet where you actually save the data. And then you can go into the whole spreadsheet data processing part where you can color code and create graphs and filter and so on and so forth. So this is something that you have to be aware. It's not something that you have to stick to Google Forms when you analyze your data. You can also connect Google Forms with Google Spreadsheets. Now, having said that, let's go back to the forms and let's see how, as I said, how we would create a simple form. And as I said, I'll just go through some basic examples and I'll show you how I would use different types of questions and for what purpose. And then we will change that form into a quiz. And we'll look also at some tips for actually helping you use the quiz feature for Google Forms. So I will start actually from scratch. By the way, in case you didn't know that, this is a useful tip. When you want to create a new document or spreadsheet or slide or form, you can just type in your Chrome Omnibox forms.new or docs.new or anything like that. So let's assume I want to create a simple evaluation, or I will just go and add different types of questions, and we'll talk about each question where I would use it. Now, depending on what I want to use the form for, I would add different questions. One thing I would say for sure is that when I use my form with my students, in most cases, I would want to collect their names. And this is something that, as you've noticed, Google Forms is trying to help me, and automatically it is changing the type of question to short answer. So it's using artificial intelligence and language analysis and machine learning. It's trying to help you out. In some cases, it's doing a good job. Definitely double check the suggestions though. So once again, if I want to use the form with a student or for a quiz, I would definitely ask for their name. Once again, if I want to use an anonymous feedback form, then definitely I will not include this question. The second question I would generally include in a form that I'm using with my students, or in some cases even with parents, let's say, or with my colleagues, is the email. Why? Because I would want to know who filled in the form, and I would like to have an easy way to actually stay in touch with them and email them back directly from the spreadsheet or from the forms interface and so on and so forth. And this is especially important if you use the self-graded quizzes and you want to release the grades later. For example, after manual review, you will definitely need to collect the email addresses. Now, talking about the idea of collecting email and actually Google Forms helping you out, you see that it also gives you a suggestion to enable email collection setting. You can enable that, and then by default, it will collect the email automatically. Now, keep in mind, this works only in your domain. So if you want to use it with parents outside of the school who do not have a Google account on the school domain, this will not work. So then it's better to include an email question. I see some questions in the chat as well. So yes, you can use forms also for choose your own ending. And actually, I will show you that in the second part of the training. And yes, you can use happy or sad faces for little ones. And I'll show you that also in the second part of the training. So these are, as I said, this is the starting point, just getting the form set up and getting into some tips. As you see, you build the form step by step, and you can add as many questions as you want. You can also add other elements. So you could, if you, for example, you've created the form already, you don't have to type the questions from scratch. You could import them from a different form. You can also add different parts of your form where you have a title, description, or you can add images or videos, for example, right? So let's say I want to add a video, and this video will be a YouTube video. So the default option is to have a YouTube video, and I've intentionally used this video from the AppsEvents channel, in which Seti shows you different ways to actually record your screen. because this is one way in which you could use forms also with your students, right? So for the flipped classroom approach, you can record your videos, put them online, and then ask students some questions based on those videos, right? So I can embed the video directly in Google Form, and then I can add a question and ask you, have you subscribed to the AppsEvents YouTube channel already? And once again, you see that Google Forms is actually trying to be helpful. Yes, no, and I will add those two options. I'll make this question required. And here we can start building our forms and adding more questions. So once again, I would say then the next question would be, what is your favorite screencasting tool, for example, right? And this would be an open-ended question. I would like to collect text, and I would ask your opinion about it as well. And then let's add some questions which could be used also as a quiz, right? And then we'll go to changing this form into a quiz. So I will also add another question, and talking about screen recorders and talking about the different channels online and finding resources online. You can also use questions related to the content of the video, right? So if you want to keep students engaged and you want to make sure that they actually watch the video, you can ask them some questions based on something that was being said in the video or something that was presented in the video. Ask them for a keyword or something like that, right? And you could also use that as a self-graded quiz, of course. So once again, another example: what is the best browser to be used with the Google Suite? And we'll have a multiple choice question. Right now, I'm just making the questions as we go, of course. So I'll have Chrome, I'll have Firefox, I'll have Edge, I'll have Safari, and we'll stop here because I just want to give you an example of how we could use this for a quiz, right? So here we go. This is how we build the form. This is how we add the questions. And this is where I'll start also giving you some tips in terms of how I would design my form. So I would basically try to keep students. I would try to prevent students from, let's say, getting divine inspiration from their colleagues, right? Especially when they're in the same classroom and they have their devices right next to each other. One option would be, for example, and that's my personal choice, to use, rather than use multiple choice questions, I would use the drop-down type of questions. It's the same outcome, so they will only be able to choose one of the answers. But just to exemplify and show you what the visual difference is, this is how the form would look like with, for example, a drop-down question and with a normal multiple choice question. So here, for example, if I have the same order of answers and I choose the first answer, it's quite easy for somebody sitting close to me to see that I chose the first option. Whereas where I have the drop-down menu, it might be a bit more difficult to read what option I chose. So that's one thing that that's good to keep in mind. The second thing is, of course, I have some options in the question settings, basically, to actually choose. I can choose to shuffle the option order. So if I choose this for this particular question, every student that accesses the form basically will get a different order of the answers. So that's quite helpful as well. So that's something that that you can think about as well. Now, quickly, just to go through some other types of questions, checkboxes. This is the type of question where you can have more than one correct answer. File upload is a useful question when you want to collect files from your students. This is something that many teachers are struggling nowadays. I've seen many teachers complaining about this online. They say that they're overwhelmed with emails because students email them files and photos rather than using Classroom or whatnot. So this is where you can actually create a Google form, create a file upload question, and then they can send you the files through a Google form. And that could be one single form which you use to collect all the files from your students, right? So this is how this is how the question would look like. And basically, you would say just, I would change the question, of course, upload your files here. And then, of course, if you want to get more granular, you can choose what type of files they can upload and so on and so forth. So this is one thing to keep in mind. And also, as I said, the other types of questions, the next sort of group of questions. These are the ones that you would use more for market research and opinions and surveys, like on a scale of 1 to 6, how happy are you with the class, and so on and so forth. Or for the multiple choice grid, for example, how often are you using the following devices? You would have computer, laptop, phone, whatnot, and you have daily, weekly, monthly, and so on and so forth. But there's also creative ways of using this in the classroom. So I could create, for example, a multiple choice grid where I have several chemical elements as a science teacher, and I would ask the students to place them in the correct period or in the correct group in the periodic table. And then I would use a multiple choice grid. And then, of course, the last two types of questions, date and time. This is something that that's literally used for arranging different events. I'm happy to read that, Aaron, that this solves the problem with the file uploads. I'll show you also how I would use it in action in the second part as well in an example. Now, at this stage, once again, this is just a form. So this is just collecting data. When I want to change a form into a quiz, I'll quickly show you that. And then we'll go through some questions before we move to the next bit. You would change a form into a quiz from the settings menu. So usually, as usual, when you see the cogwheel icon or the gear icon, that's the sign for the settings menu. And this is where you can play a bit with the settings, right? So you can automatically collect email addresses. You can restrict forms in your domain, which is really important, especially if you have anything related to student data and so on and so forth. You can also limit it to one response, and this is particularly important for quizzes, especially if you want to have formative or summative assessments and so on and so forth. You can allow people to edit the responses after they submit or see the summary charts and text responses. This is where you decide on an individual basis which works best for you. Under the presentation, I just want to show you this part and have you focus on this part. Shuffle question order. This can also help when you're working with quizzes in the classroom, because this will shuffle also the question order in the form, not only the answers for the individual multiple choice questions. So this can be quite helpful as well. Yeah, exactly. Very good point, Laura. So if you do shuffle the question order, what I would recommend is to split your form in 2 different sections. And in the first section, you will have the name and the email, for example, or just the name. And you put all of the questions, the quiz questions, in the second part of the form, in the second section. And what this does is that basically the questions will be shuffled only within that section. It will not be mixed with the other sections. So that's also something to keep in mind. And then this is where we get to the quizzes part. So we can change the form into a quiz with one button. By the way, if you use Chromebooks, you can also use the locked mode for Chromebooks. This is great because in the locked mode, students cannot do anything else other than work on the form. They will have the form in front of them, and that's it. They cannot actually open other tabs, work on or search for things, and so on and so forth. But once again, this works only on Chromebooks. Then the next part is, when do you release the grade? Immediately after each submission, or in some cases, you might want to release them later after manual review. When would you do that? When, for example, you plan to use the same quiz with more groups of kids, and you don't want the first group to see the results and then tell the others the answers. That's one scenario. Another scenario would be that some questions you might want, for example, a paragraph type of question where you have more text from the student, and that cannot be automatically graded. So then you will have to manually grade it and give the feedback, and then you would send the feedback back to the students. So this is it. This is how I change the form into a quiz, but I have to go through one more step. So now that I've changed the form into a quiz, I need to show Google Forms which are the correct answers and how many points do I want to assign to each question. So you'll notice that once that I've changed the form into a quiz, I have this extra button for every question. So now I have to go to the questions I want to grade. So I'll click on the answer key. I can choose how many points I want to assign for that question. I'll say 10 points for this question. And I need to choose the correct answer, right? Which is obviously for this question, it should be yes. If it's no, then you're wrong and you have to go there and subscribe. Of course, I'm using now this as an example. This is not a question I would grade normally, but I'm just using this question as an example. Then I can also add individual feedback, not individual feedback, but different feedback for the correct or for the wrong answer. And I can say for the incorrect answer, I would just say, hey, why didn't you subscribe? I can put the link, right? And I can put the link in there in Google Forms, and I will just say subscribe now. Or of course, I could include a link to some useful resources for my students, like a review document or something like that. But the main thing is to keep in mind that you can actually add links or directly YouTube videos there from here. Or if it's correct, you can just say awesome. Make sure to check more videos, right? So this is, once again, I'm using an example now on the spot, but this is where you can give different type of feedback. Those students that get the correct answer, you can give them extension materials. Those that didn't get the correct answer, you can give them revision materials, or you can guide them through different other tools and resources. So that's the way to actually grade the questions. If you have a self-grading quiz, you can automatically grade multiple choice questions, checkbox questions, drop down, and short answer questions as well. So just to give you an example, this is another example of a question that I would definitely not grade, but I'm using this just as an example now. So I could just say, hey, Loom, right? Or I could change the question, and I could also have more than one correct answer. And then depending on what students would write in the answer box, I could actually accept more of them as a correct answer. And this is where also it would be a good choice for me to manually grade this question rather than using auto grade. And of course, I would need to decide what questions I'm actually automatically grading and which ones I am not. And that's it. I've turned my form into a quiz. Of course, I'll give it a title, so demo quiz. And now I can send the form to my students either via email directly from the forms interface, or I can copy the link and then send the link to my students via email, or I can tweet it, I can put it on Facebook, I can send it in Hangouts, wherever I want. Or the last part, and I'll wrap because I know that we are getting close to the end of the session, I could also attach the form to a classroom assignment. And the good part about it is that when you actually create the assignment in Classroom, you can actually import the grades automatically. So you'll see that I can actually add the form directly from my Google Drive. This is the one I've just created, and voila, I can assign this to my students. When they fill in the form, their answers will, or the grades will automatically, I can choose to automatically import the grades in Google Classroom as well. So as I said, I'll stop here with the intro part. This was just a brief overview of how I would build a form, how I would get going, and some of the questions that I would use and in what scenario. There's many other ways in which you could use these questions, of course.
Yeah, no, Bogdan, that was amazing run through, and it's really caught people's attention. Really pleased to see we're still sort of over 70 viewers. So obviously there's still an interest in what's going on, which is great. So I think you picked up most of the questions. We had a question come in about, can you do a matching kind of activity? And Jenny Lou came back with a yes. So the question was, let me just switch over to this one. There's also a lot of interest about how I did the ticker tape along the bottom. And it is StreamYard indeed. Yeah, so mainly there was questions around, can you time limit the form?
Yeah.
So I presume that's the kind of thing you're probably going into over the next 30 minutes is some of the add-ons that are available.
So what I would say is that there are different ways in which you could do that. You could also literally post a timer on your screen. And when the timer hits 0, so if I would do this in the classroom, I would just say, hey, did you see the timer on the screen? When the timer hits 0, I go and I switch the form from accepting responses to not accepting responses any longer. So this is the hardcore version, when you literally cut access and people cannot fill in the form anymore. There are various other add-ons that can limit how many people can fill in a form, or how many people can choose, for example, a certain time slot for a meeting. So there are different options here. But just to show you, because I have my screen back, what I meant by literally manually stopping the responses or manually disabling the option to accept responses, you do it from here. So this is one option. And once again, this is the one that you can do in Google Forms directly. It's manual, but it works. If you want, you have different add-ons like Form Limiter or different other add-ons that can help with that as well.
So there was also, I'm loving this, just to make sure I don't only give you the questions. So a lot of interest in that there. And I'm just trying to here's the question. Can we do match the following in Google Forms? So you showed a checkbox question where you could select more than one. For anyone that's done the certified educator level 1 or 2, maybe, I don't know if they were referring to the drag and drop option.
I think so, yeah.
Which is not quite so easy to replicate.
Yeah, so that's not so easy to replicate in Google Forms. What you can do, though, is to use Google Drawings, for example. And you create the different elements and text boxes. You have some of them fixed as a background in Google Drawings, and the other ones, they are elements that you can move around. And you ask the students to move them around and, of course, to match them. So that's one option. The second option, which is a bit convoluted, if you really want to use forms, you could create an image with the options and then create a multiple choice grid and put the options and have them choose what they want to match them with. But as I said, it's a bit convoluted, and that definitely doesn't work for smaller kids because it's a bit too complicated.
So I think there's a few questions like about add-ons you might suggest. So I think we're probably sort of moving into the next section with these questions. There's a question about have you used form limiter? I mean, I have for both time limited, so a form will stop accepting for responses at a particular time. I've also used it where the first 10 people to sign up will be able to fill in the form, and then it will stop accepting after that. So I've used form limiter myself. Is that something you had chalked in for the next 30 minutes?
I will mention some add-ons. So form limiter was not one that I would go in depth, but I can actually quickly show how it works. The main idea with the add-ons is, and that's why I started on my answer with the manual way of doing it and using just Google Forms, because I am aware that in many schools, you have to go through a certain process to get the add-ons approved or installed. And this is the case also, especially in the US, in many schools, it's controlled at the district level. So that's why I went with the manual, quick and easy solution first. And then, of course, if you can add the add-ons, that's great. You can use different add-ons as well. Keep in mind the add-ons, most of them are third-party applications or tools. Check the privacy statements and everything else before you install any random add-on out there. So keep that in mind.
There's one other question here from Martha, which was, can we add on voice notes for speaking tests? And can students answer in voice too? I can't think of a straightforward way of doing that. There's like you can link out to a voice, to an audio file in Drive, but then have them go back.
So that's I've actually done that with a voice note. Or a recording, not a voice note, but actually a recording. So I've created the recording, I saved it in Drive, I've shared it with the link, and then in Google Forms, I would just literally insert, for example, a text section, and I would just say, please listen to the recording, and then I would put the link here. So insert link here. And then after this, I would ask them the questions for whatever I want them to answer based on that recording. Or if I want them to actually record something and then submit the file, of course, I would give them instructions, show them how to do that. And I would ask a file upload question, please send me a recording. That's one option. Or the second option would be, I can also, rather than having this question, I could have a simple short answer question, and I could tell them, please upload your file to Google Drive, share it with the link, and give me the link here. And then I can access your file. So that's another option. That's how I've done it in the past, basically.
Yeah, and I think Darren is also suggesting a very similar option, which is using the file upload question option as well to enable them to upload their audio files too.
Yeah.
And there are lots of sort of really easy voice recorder extensions for those audio files that you want to easily record.
Yeah. You also have, by the way, Google Keep, which you can run on your phone, and you can record a voice note in Google Keep and move from there. It's integrated with the Google Suite, so it's really easy to use as well.
Cool. And Jenny Lee was asking, what's the file size limit for uploading in forms? If you're able to just change to a file upload question, pretty extensive size of files you can go for if you want to. So is 10 gig the largest? Yeah.
So this is the largest, but once again, of course, I would not recommend uploading 10 gigabyte files with Google Forms.
I mean, I think while storage isn't unlimited in Google Drive, I'm aware there is a limit for an individual file of 5 terabytes.
Yeah, that's one thing. The other thing is also, please be mindful. We should be mindful as teachers also on the conditions that our kids have at home. And they will not always have a fast connection to the internet. And that's the case for me, for example, because I live in the center of Prague and my upload speed is really bad. So when I need to upload something, it takes ages. So if I would be asked to upload a large file by my teacher, I could easily spend 3 hours in front of my laptop waiting for the file to be uploaded. So keep that in mind. Try to stick to smaller sizes when you want to upload the files.
There's one more thing I'll highlight before you jump into the next section and spice up your forms, which was just some questions from Creativity Infinity around some of the limitations of the quiz. I don't know if you showed it, I may have not spotted it. In the responses, when you've got a quiz, you can go through and manually override the automatic grading. I think that probably sort of solves a lot of those issues, that you can go in and give scores where you feel that credit is deserved. There's still the teacher autonomy.
Yeah, so for example, just to give an example, what is the capital city of Czechia, right? And of course, some students might say Prague, and I'll have it a short answer. But some students might write Prague with a lowercase, right? And then if I don't put in this answer as a correct answer, and then some of my students do write Prague with a lowercase, and then they come back to me and complain, I can also manually go back and update the grades and say, yeah, okay, I can accept this answer. So keep in mind, because it's an automated process, you do have some limitations, and it depends on how you phrase your questions and what types of answers you expect. But if you want to have a better control of the feedback you give and you want to accept more possible answers, you can also look into the Flubaroo add-on, which is actually an add-on for Google Sheets, which gives you a bit more flexibility in terms of working through the self-graded quizzes when it comes to the answers. It's a bit more complex to set up than the Google Forms by default. But if you want that advanced, let's say, feedback capability, then definitely have a look at that.
Awesome and tremendous. Right. So I will let you move on to the next section, where you're sort of obviously a bit shorter on time now. So I will get out your way and let you push on. So back over to you as you go a little bit deeper into Google Forms with some top tips. Over to you, Bogdan.
I'll move faster through them, because the main idea was just to get people inspired and give them some ideas of or some examples of how I've actually used them, right? And by the way, good tip, when you're done with something, you can actually just close all the tabs, because we are trying to keep things organized and have a clutter-free browser. So I just want to touch upon some creative ways of using Google Forms. As I said, in most cases, we use them for just creating data collection forms and whatnot, or creating quizzes, but we can use them for other things. And also, I want to answer a question I had earlier. Could you include images in Google Forms? And that's actually something that I want to show you now, how easy it is to include images and how easily you can get creative with images in Google Forms. So I'll start actually from scratch. And you can use images just like you would use videos, as I said. So when you have the questions, you can insert an image and then add some questions based on that. But you could also include images as the possible answers, right? So I could just say, how are you feeling today? or how do you feel about the lesson, or anything like that. And of course, I could add some options as a multiple choice option, but keep in mind, especially for smaller kids, they are more visual, and having forms in a visual format can be very helpful. So then rather than typing an answer, I would go to add an image. And this is where I can actually search for images, or I can use any of the images I have around. So I'll just say happy, and to bring some images that are good, I would just say happy emoji. I choose the image, I insert it, and voila, I have the first visual option. And it helps also to type in what the image represents. And then I will just say another option, and I would search for the image. And I would just say, well, I'm feeling meh. Let's see if, no, I need meh emoji. Okay, and I can use one of the images that pop up. And voila, this is how easy it is to actually add visual options for the images. Now, what's good to know also if you use images is, first of all, the text will always be displayed under the image you choose, and they will be resized so they occupy the same amount of space. So it doesn't matter how large the image is, they will always be sort of occupying the same amount of space on the screen in the view, in the live version of the form. Now, something else that I wanted to mention here, and this is something that works really well with smaller kids as well, is using Bitmojis. I don't know if you're aware of Bitmoji or if you've used Bitmojis, but this is something that allows you to create your own avatar. This was the craze a few years ago when Snapchat was launched and whatnot. You can install the Chrome extension. Kids love it, especially smaller kids. They really love the Bitmojis. You can literally just insert any of the Bitmojis here as well. So just to show you how this would work. And by the way, as I said, I'm not going in all the details. I'm just giving you some ideas of how you would actually use this. I would go to insert an image, add an image, and then I would go to by URL. So I would insert the image by using a link. And then I go to my Bitmoji and I search for whatever I want to insert. So I will just say sad or whatever, right? And I will just right click on the Bitmoji, copy image address, and go to my forms and paste it here. And this brings the Bitmoji into my form. So once again, especially for those smaller kids that are in kindergarten or elementary school, this is a great way of helping them relate to whatever you have in the form. And also, I'm trying to bring in some resources that can be useful across the board. So not only for middle school and upper school teachers, but also for the smaller kids. And talking about Bitmojis, by the way, Bitmoji belongs to Snapchat, so they bought it a while ago. They also have the Snapchat camera, which, by the way, works with Google Meet as well. So if you want to have a green background, or you want to change your background or play with the Snapchat filters, you can use that in Google Meet as well. That's more than what we can cover now, but I just wanted you to make you aware of that. Oh, yeah, now I see that Darren just mentioned it also in the chat. So this is the first part related to using images in forms. Please be aware of that. Now, I've also included on the slides, by the way, you have the links and you'll get them after the live session. I've also included Equatio on the same slide with images. Why? Because Equatio, it was mentioned earlier, it's basically an awesome, brilliant tool for STEM teachers. For math teachers, science teachers, and anything basically where you need to have equations and functions and graphs and anything like that. So Equatio is an extension for Google Chrome, and it works in all of the Google apps. Here, of course, I will show you how this works in Google Forms. And as you see in my Google Forms, I have this Equatio button. Once I have the extension installed, I can easily insert, for example, math. And that's why I've placed Equatio under the working with images, because what Equatio does, I'll quickly show you, is it opens the menu. I can easily either voice type or draw or just come up with an equation, right? So I would just say 1/2x, and I can literally type, and it comes up with suggestions, plus 3. And when I'm done and I choose insert math, what it does is it creates an image, which it then inserts into the Google form, and my students can actually choose this as a possible answer. And here, of course, you can have quite a lot of different expressions and different options, like you can have integrals or square roots, cube roots, whatever. You can actually play around with all of the mathematical expressions, right, from 1 to n, or I'm just literally writing some random examples. But the main idea is, you see how easy it is to actually create the equations. It's quite suggestive, and you can once again create your possible answers. Now, keep in mind, if you want to do that.
May I just jump in on Equatio? As a maths teacher, the voice typing option in Equatio is really, really effective for building that mathematical language with younger learners as well. So if anyone was slightly put off by an integral, getting the children to speak the maths in using the voice operated version is a really nice way for sort of building that language. Why didn't it give the sign I expected? And they can go back and review that. So getting your students to speak in from distance might be a really nice way of checking that they're still building that maths understanding. So I couldn't help jump in on a maths one.
Well, thank you for the input. And I'll actually just quickly show how well it actually works. Integral from 1 to n of function of x equal to plus y. So this is where you actually, let me stop it, sorry. This is where you actually have to get used to actually change what you're trying to input, and you have to speak the language. And as you said, Ben, it's great also for students to practice how this would work, right? And this was just a random example just to show you that it actually picks up the voice typing, it picks up the voice or the speech, and it turns it into expressions. Of course, you have to practice, and that's something that can help students, as you said, get into that place where they can formulate even the expressions much better. It's the same with, for example, using your phone and taking some examples, taking some photos, right? Examples of chemical equations. Now, keep in mind the chemical equations. This is a newer feature, so I would just say sodium or whatever. I can search for I can search to the formulas, right? Sodium carbonate. And as you'll see, it works more with different components rather than getting the whole formula together. So I could have the ions, for example, and for the sodium, I would just choose the sodium ions and so on and so forth. Now, as I said, keep in mind, Equatio was primarily designed for mathematics first, and then the chemistry part was added later, and they are still adding more features here as well. So sodium aluminate, what I was searching for earlier, for example, it will pop up here as well. So keep in mind, this is also something that you can play with. And of course, you can insert this also as an image. Now, I will insert the equation in my form. And as I said, just to preview the form, this is how the form would look like for my students. I can choose from the different options, and they can submit the form. Now, just something to clarify, Equatio is free for teachers. So what you've seen me doing here, inserting the different answers. And by the way, you can also insert functions and graphs in the question. So you could just, for example, use a graph editor. Some of you might know Desmos, but I could just say sine of, I could just have a different graph, right? And I could insert different options for the graph and plot them and insert this also into my form, sorry. So I have the sine of x function. I can play with it, add it into my question, and ask some questions related to that particular graph, for example, for my students. Now, as I said, what you've seen me do here, I can easily do that. And as you see here, I've inserted the graph in the actual question body and not as an answer option. So you can do that with the free Equatio account you can get as a teacher. For students, if you want students to be able to create the forms and insert all of these equations, for that you would need a paid account for the students. But having said that, as I said, having the free account for teachers can be of great help. And we went a bit overboard with the discussions earlier, and also with the examples of Equatio. But keep in mind, as I said, Equatio was free for teachers even before the COVID crisis. I think they are offering it for free for teachers since 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So that's something that you can be sure will not go away. So definitely have a look at it. And in the slides, you have also the link where you can actually get the license. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is also keep in mind that you can also have your phone. You can use your phone and file upload if you want students to actually upload different assignments for you and so on and so forth. And I'll quickly move to the next step because I really want to show you this in terms of how you can use the multiple choice questions to actually either assign differentiated tasks or creating personalized stories. And I'll quickly go through the examples. And then, as I said, it's something that it's more trying to inspire you rather than showing you how to do it step by step. So for example, when I would like to assign differentiated tasks, let's say I'm away from school and I'm not sure if my substitute teacher is a science teacher and I want to make sure that everything is under control, I could do this. Or even now, using distance learning, I could create differentiated tasks forms where different students will work on different things at the same time. So here, for example, I would use my email address, right? Because as I said, I am trying to keep track of who filled in the form, and I want to stay in touch with them. And then this is where the magic happens. They can choose what they want to work on. I gave you 2 examples. Let's start with the periodic table revision. Based on this, they are sent to a certain part of my form, a certain section of my form, where, for example, I'm giving them a video and then I'm asking them different questions based on the video, right? And this is the more of the classical use for forms. But if I would go back, I want to show you the other example which I created, which is the vocabulary part. So here, the students that choose vocabulary, rather than giving them a form and a quiz, and asking them questions, I can give them instructions literally in my Google form. And I can tell them, hey, read this text. Then I would say, pay attention and identify the words you do not understand or you're not sure about. In the next question, I will say, okay, how many words did you identify in the text that you didn't know before or you're struggling or understanding? You write the answer, then I'm giving you the next task. Okay, now that we've gone through that, create a visual dictionary, create a copy of the document here, and make a copy. So I've set up the link for you already, and then you can go and create a dictionary for those words. When you're done with this, you go back to the form, and you say, okay, once you're done, please upload your file, and this is where you send me your file and you send it to your teacher. So this is, once again, something that it's really easy to do, and this is where I would upload and send the file to my teacher as well. So this is, as I said, one way to actually working on assigning differentiated tasks or using gamification systems where rather than having different activities, you would have different points here. And on the same note, you can also create personalized stories. And it's the same function. And this is more suitable for smaller kids, but you can, of course, use it for middle school and upper school as well. And there you go, like, hey, you wake up in a strange yet charming land with a treasure map and so on and so forth. And then you choose what happens next. And based on your choice, you're taken to a different part of the form, and then you get more details, and then you go and choose your next, step, and so on and so forth. Now, I could use this just to tell a story for the small kids, but keep in mind, I could also add the learning component to it. So for example, here, when I say stop and make a fire, I could also include a question in the form and say, okay, when you stop and make a fire, my question for you is, hey, what do you need to be able to create a fire, right? So I will not only allow them to choose the next step of the story, but I can add that assessment component in one way or the other. So I can just include a question in the fire section and say, what materials do you need to create a fire, for example. And this is where I add also the idea of adding the assessment into the form. Now, keep in mind, this is an example where I've used more like Bitmojis for smaller kids, but you can very well use this for even high school kids, where you say, okay, what metal would you use for a certain activity, right, or for a certain purpose? And then based on the metal they choose, you take them to different parts of the form where you ask them, okay, tell me why you chose this metal, show me how it's used, tell me some information about that metal, and so on and so forth. So all of this is done with a simple multiple choice question where you choose the go-to section based on answer option. And this is why this is so powerful. You can adapt it to so many different situations, and you can do so many different things with it. I showed you just some examples. So what you do is you split your form into different sections, and then you choose which section you want to send the kids or the people who fill in the form once they choose a certain option in the answer key. So once again, this is one other way of using it. And I am running out of time, and I would not want to steal from Jon's time, but I just want to make you aware of other things you can do in Google Forms. You can use different add-ons for mail merging, for example, where you can turn the responses you receive in a Google form into documents and automatically email them to the students, or even just creating, let's say, attendance certificates or participation certificates or anything like that. So how would you use the add-ons? You will find them in the Forms interface under the More menu, and this is where you'll find the add-ons. I've mentioned some of them in the slides, which you'll get later, but as I said, please be aware of this option as well. And I'll stop talking now because, as I said, I'm going over time and I don't want to do that. But please feel free to reach out also after the session. You have the email, you have my Twitter account. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for AppsEvents. You'll find lots of different useful tips there as well. And do follow AppsEvents on Twitter as well, because that's where we share a lot of the tools and ideas we have as well in our toolbox, so to say. And quickly, to answer the last question, can you download the whole form as it looks online? You could take a screenshot, but why would you download a form? So that's something that you would use it mainly online. And if you want to print it, so just to quickly show you, you could print it. So you can save it as a PDF and print it if you want, but forms are mainly designed to be used online.
Awesome stuff. There's also a question. You mentioned a mail merge very briefly, and I think Amy would. The capitalization tells me she'd love to see a bit more of that. If you're happy to give us a couple of minutes just to show how that might be done.
I can quickly show you this. Sorry, Jon, for going over time. So I've actually. But this is really brief and really quick. So one example would be Form Publisher, where I can use, for example, a form where I collect the email and the name, and I can have an evaluation form at the end of my training session, for example. And also I can ask for the feedback. But once I have the Form Publisher as an add-on, what I can do next is I can take the data from, and this is where, let's hope it works. Let me reload. So I can take the data from the actual Form Publisher, from the actual form, and I can start the add-on. And it will tell me, hey, we've identified these questions. These are the data points we could actually pull from your answers. And you can either create your own template, or in this case, I'll use one of the pre-formatted templates. This is what it will do. It will generate the document for me. It will look, as I said, through the questions I have in my form. And this is where I'll have the markers. So this is what I choose, what I want to include in the final document, right? So I'll just leave them like that for now, just to speed up the process for a bit. Then I go to the next step. Normally, I would choose what I want to actually include in the final document. This is where I can choose how I want to name the generated files, and I choose what I want to happen with those files. So I could have a copy of the document in my drive, or I can change the destination folder. I can change the template name, and so on and so forth. And as I said, I'm moving really fast now through this just to give you an idea of how this works. And this is where I choose how I want to, or what I want to do with the documents, right? So in this case, I can send them as PDF, or I can create Google Docs which they can edit, or I can just have it sent as a Word document, and so on and so forth. So this is where I'm actually done setting up my my form publisher. And now when somebody fills in the form, what should normally happen is that they would get an email with the document attached to it once they fill in that form. So quickly, I will fill in the form. Now, keep in mind, sometimes it's not happening instantly, but let's try it. Let's give it a go. And of course, I would normally use more time to actually design my template, and I wouldn't use just the standard template that comes from publisher, but I would actually design a nice attendance certificate or something like that, and I would send that one. So once again, once this is happening, it goes through the process, it's automating, it's creating the certificate, and it will be sending it to the email address I've used. And as I said, it's not happening on the spot, so I'm checking my email now to see if I get it, but I wouldn't want to steal too much time from Jon's session. But here we go. I have the email that I've received, and this is how the document looks like. So you started personalized it with my name, my email, this was my answer, and so on and so forth. So keep in mind, this is the template I've used. I can personalize this in any way I want. So I don't have to stick to the standard template. I can change it in any way I want. I can choose to email these files. I can choose to keep them on Drive. I can choose to play with them in different ways. And there are different mail merging add-ons. Form Publisher is one of them. There's also Formule and Autocrat, which work more with Google Sheets. So you start from Google Sheets, but they do a very similar thing. Does that cover really, really quickly how mail merging works and what it does?
I think you have happy customers, not the right word, but yeah. Amy, I think, has got a little bit to play around with. We also seem to have some very loyal educators working into the middle of the morning in the Philippines. And yeah, people were sort of threatening. We started off with a theme of educator and student well-being. So Aaron, I must encourage you to take advantage of some sleep for your own mental health, obviously, but I appreciate the sentiment. Really glad everyone's got some takeaways that they can use, hopefully sort of over the next few days and weeks in this situation. So yeah, Bogdan, thank you so much for sharing. Hopefully everyone has managed to get the chance to follow you and sort of pick up any questions they've got. We really appreciate your time and effort. It's always a pleasure to be working with you. And yeah, Forms is where it started as well. So that's a delight.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Jon, once again, and good luck.
I'll
awesome. Be around. And
yeah, and I'm pleased to say that you are being referred to as Sir Bogdan there. So that's hugely deserved, Bogdan. You know I've been calling you Sir for ages. So
thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bogdan. Yeah, right. Wash your hands and hydrate in that order.
Oh, awesome. In that order. Sorry. Okay. Good luck, Jon.
Cheers, Bogdan. See you.
Hey, Jon. Thank you for waiting patiently. Obviously, you've only been sitting there the whole time from start to end.
I have been glued to both my seat and the screen for but it's flown by. Some extraordinarily good tips shared from both Kim and Bogdan there. So hopefully I won't disappoint.
I'm sure you won't. And I think what a great way to end with Google Classroom. So if we're talking about G Suite tools that support distance learning and nice appropriate ones for using on Acer devices, Chromebooks and otherwise, then Google Classroom is the place to go. So really looking forward to a few tips and tricks for using Google Classroom. Barry, I think this is where I definitely need to use this particular tool. Here we go. So yeah, Jon, I will, without further ado, I'll pass over to you and let you get started.
Thank you,
feel free to sort of share a little bit about your background. Jon's often to be seen on the Google stand at Bet and ISTE, sort of presenting on all things Google. So hopefully a few of you recognize him.
Yeah, or perhaps not. So yeah, my name's Jon. I've been a Google trainer for 4 or 5 years now, and I now work at a school in central London on the leadership team in a role of digital learning leader. But in addition to that, I do lots of work with AppsEvents and supporting them in summits and workshops across the world, and including doing Google Classroom demonstrations. At BET this year, it was with Rachel. And yes, so hopefully one or two things to share with everyone here. And with the theme being looking at how we can utilize Google's flagship tool for education, Google Classroom, with our students, not only during this period of remote learning, with a little bit of focus on that, but then how we can actually really leverage these tools for just using in our day-to-day life at school. So I've got my classroom up here. This is my first class. I'm going to take you through 2 demonstration classrooms and then one that I've actually got working with my own school. So in this first class, this is just how Google Classroom appears. So it's looked at the title that I've given it, in this case, remote learning, and it's tried to apply the theme. But just so you know, like quite a nice tip and an easy way for your students to differentiate between their classes is to change a theme. And you can easily do this from a gallery of many different options. I'm going to jump into other, and I'm going to go ahead and choose this video games one, because nothing says remote learning quite an old school video game setup there, perhaps a Nintendo. And so you'll see here, that was super easy for me to do. I've now got this class code. For those of you that are new to Classroom, I can share that code with any of my students and they can very easily just jump straight into that class. Okay, so that's the first thing to look at there. Before I go into any other features, I'm just going to go into the settings and show you 1 or 2 things that you might like to look at, particularly perhaps when it comes to this remote learning experience. So when I open up settings, I'm going to scroll down a tiny bit, just into the general settings here. And I'm going to look at this particular item, classwork on the stream. Now, this is something that I would recommend anyway, and I do so with my colleagues at Halcyon. But I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off notifications. You would have seen that initially that stream was really heavily populated with lots of classroom announcements that have come from my classwork. But in the case of remote learning, it's actually quite a nice idea to have the stream as a place for perhaps more social interaction. So maybe you want to find out what your class have been up to. You might want to share one or two things that you might have been doing, perhaps sort of straying away from your subject, but just giving that little bit more of a personal touch that we're definitely lacking. And again, just reflecting what we spoke about earlier and continuing to build on community. You'll also notice this is a brand new feature. So still in the general settings of Classroom, is you can generate a Google Meet. So this code, once I make it visible to students, would be visible to all students in my class. And now when I tap on Save, it's going to take me back into the stream. And you notice that right at the top, I now have this Meet link. And it also has this nickname. So it's a nicknamed Meet link. So I get all the wonderful features associated with a nicknamed link that I know Ben was discussing earlier. You'll also see that all of that clutter has gone away from the Classroom stream now. And I can now put in something here that can be a nice comment to inspire my students to, as I say, engage perhaps a little bit outside of the curriculum. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump into classwork now. I'm going to show you one thing that you might like to think about when it comes to this online learning. So rather than just, you traditionally would probably have your topics split up into different units of work that you'd be doing as part of your particular subject. But with remote learning, what's actually quite a nice idea, particularly if you're going a little bit away from having your regular timetable structure, is you might want to think about using weeks as topics. So in this case, as I say, it's just a demo class, but I've got week 1, week 2, and week 3. I'm going to go ahead and just jump into this assignment here. So getting started with G Suite. And I'm going to view the assignment. And you'll see that what I've done in the instructions is I put some simple instructions in, but I've also added a video, because certainly feedback from my students is that it's quite nice to have that little bit more of a personal touch than you perhaps might get if you were just using the kind of basic interactions of Classroom. So what I've done here is I've used a really great Chrome extension called Screencastify, and I've captured a video of myself that I can then add to the assignment, and then the students can get that here. And when they play the video, this is me talking through this particular assignment. Okay, I'm going to go back to my classwork now. And I'm going to just go ahead and just show you 1 or 2 other features that you might like to look at. One of my favorite titles, by the way, from an assignment when in Chrome, always find that hilarious. And I'm just going to, so you haven't only got to share assignments, it's also possible to share things like materials, and we're going to look at that in just a couple of minutes. But also you can put in questions as prompts. So for example here, I've just put in a statement, remote working works, and I've got this question here. So rather than just having an assignment, someone's joined the class wonderfully. So I've got this question has gone out here, and then the class are able to answer the question, and I can then see that, and I've made it visible as well, so peers can see what each other are thinking. That's also a way that you can just increase that social interaction with your students. Okay, I'm going to go back into my assignments here, and I'm just going to show you one other thing, is that you can, so there are lots of different ways that you can set up your assignments within Classroom. You can you can push assignments out straight away, or you can save them as drafts, or you can schedule them. And you can see that these two at the bottom here, so Respect Your Selfie and The Future, those are both drafts. And all I need to do then is to go into the assignment, open it up, and I can push that out, and that becomes live for my students. But the point is I can do the work when I want, and it can just be ready to go for the students at a time that works, both for myself and for my class. Okay, I'm going to jump into this next class now. This is actually much the setup that we use, as you can see, at the Google for Education stand at BET 2020. I'm going to go straight into classwork, and I'm going to take you through just a couple of features here. The first assignment, we are, so the title is Grace Hopper, and we're using a Google Doc. I'm going to just show you here. So what I've done is I've made a copy for each student, and that's really useful for me as a teacher because I get a live thumbnail into all of the students' work. And it also means that there's no confusion about where the student's work is. They haven't sent it to me. It's got a funny title. It's all just there ready for me to look at. So I can see one student has turned their work in. So I'm just going to open up this piece of student work. And if you're a regular user of Classroom, you'll be very familiar with this grading interface. If not, this is the wonderful grading workflow that just comes as standard with all assignments in Google Classroom. So what I can do is I've got a menu here that I can just flick between my students. I'm going to stick with this student here, and I'm going to show you just how easy it is to put a comment in. So let's just say that I want to put a comment in line here. And I'm just going to say, where is Vassar? This would then go through as a notification for the student so that there's been a comment in the doc, and this inline comment will take them straight to that particular place. Before I shared the assignment with my students, I turned on something called Originality Reports. Originality Reports are a super useful tool that are built into Classroom, where what happens is students' work is referenced against hundreds of billions of web pages and tens of millions of books, and it looks to match those with external content. So I've already run the report here, and I'm going to now go ahead and open up this particular report. And you'll see that it gives me a summary pane on the right-hand side. And it will also show me, if I click, for example, on here, it's going to highlight, and this student passage matches exactly an article from the web. And I can see that it's lacking a reference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the student work now, and I'm going to highlight that particular passage. And I'd like to remind them with a comment, just to make sure that as good digital citizens, they are referencing their work. And I'm again going to use the comment, but this time I'm going to leverage the power of something called the comment bank. The comment bank is basically a bank of resources that you can curate yourself. You can build it up. You can use the same comments across classes and across assignments. To access the comment bank, all you need to do is to tap the hashtag key. And then this is now live. And then so all I need to do is type a keyword in. So I'm just going to type site. I'm going to put a comment in there. And again, that's now a nice inline comment. But using the comment bank, just saving that extra bit of time. So really useful for me because I can take that time and use it on something much more beneficial. Like I can jump into the private comments that are just between me and the student, and I can give them a nice summary. But in this case, I'll just put something in quickly. So I'll just ask the student to review this particular piece of work. Let's give them a grade. And that's going to go back. As I mentioned right at the start, really easy now. I'm not going to kind of close this down, find a student work in my Google Drive. I can just go through and start the same process very, very simply by clicking on the next student. But for now, because in the interest of time, I'm just going to jump back into Classroom and go to the next assignment. This next assignment is saved in draft, okay? You can see that it's a Google slide deck that's going to go out to my students. But before I share it with my students, I'm going to tap on this edit function here. So I go to edit, you would notice that I've had that set as made a copy for each student. So that's great. That's going to be a huge time saver for me. I'm not going to turn originality reports on this time, But what I am going to do is I'm going to reuse a rubric from another assignment. If you're not familiar with rubrics, once you see it, it will give you some really great understanding there. So go to reuse rubric. I can find another class. Let's go for my design class here in year 7. And I can bring in a rubric here. I can open the rubric up and you'll see that this is what it is. So a rubric essentially provides all of your students a really nice scaffold. So really useful for remote learning is that you have this very clear framework of what you're expecting as a teacher that can be there as a reference for the student. So this looks fine. You'll see that I've got categories and different criteria to get the different levels. So that's fine. That's already been attached to my assignment. And now it's ready to go. So I'm just going to push this out and that will become live for my class. When I open up a student's piece of work, you'll notice that exactly the same grading workflow happens with slides as we saw previously with Google Docs. So I'm going to go to my student work here, and I'll just click on a random piece of student work. Let's refresh that page. And there we go. Before I do so, just something which is worth noting is that whenever you set up a Google Classroom, that classroom has its own folder that sits within your Google Drive. But what's also worth noting is any time that you create an assignment, you also have a folder for that particular assignment. So that's super useful. Right, so I'm just going to click on this student piece of work here. And I can go in and I could put comments in just as you saw me do before with the Google Doc and the Grace Hopper document. But what I'm going to look at now is I have this rubric up here on the right-hand side. If I've forgotten my level descriptors for the criteria, I can click on the drop-down arrow. I can go ahead and choose those. Let's go there. And you'll see what it's done is it's auto-calculated the grade for me. So that's, again, just really, really useful and saves me time to put a nice comment in. So let's just go for lovely stuff. I would post that back to the student. The student would get notification to say that I've reviewed their work. And just as before, I can then jump back in and look at the next piece of student work. Okay. I'm just going to go back to classwork here. And yeah, so this is how your classrooms look. I know Bogdan had a mind-blowingly wonderful session just now on Google Forms. Just so you know, Google Forms integrate, just in case you missed that session, Google Forms integrates super well with Classroom, and you can actually set it up to import all grades from a Google Form straight into your classwork gradebook, which appears up here. Okay, so I'm going to jump now into a third Google Classroom. This is actually something that I've got live with my colleagues at Halcyon. So here we are. This is the one. So if I jump into the stream first of all, this is slightly different. So this is actually a classroom that I set up just before we went into remote learning. And this is a classroom for PD. So this is actually, so the only members of this class are members of staff. They're all part of the team at the school that I work in. And it's also important to note that they're not just teachers. So we've got all of the admin staff, we've got some mother tongue teachers. So we have lots of international students. It's very important that they're part of it too. But everyone is part of this particular classroom community. If I go into classwork now, it's slightly different to the setup that I showed previously in the demonstration class. And I'm using topics in a slightly more traditional way. So you'll notice here that I've got them actually separated into different topics. Just so here, you know, we've got our using Meet, digital resources, etc. But what I've been trying to do is to encourage staff to interact and to take on the role of a student. So I think that it's really important, particularly for those that haven't necessarily pushed the boundaries of Classroom, is to once you put yourself in the shoes of a student, that it really opens your eyes to the things that are super intuitive and to understand from a student's perspective that otherwise you might have missed out on. So you'll see that we've got lots of resources here going down, but I haven't actually got to scroll down through all this. There's quite a lot of topics. Something which is useful to know and that you might benefit from yourself is I can just go ahead and I can choose a particular topic here. So in this case, individuals and societies, and you'll see that I've actually put some material in here. And each of those materials is designed to be of use for the colleagues that I'm working with in each of those distinct subject areas. I'm just going to go into Classroom just super quickly and just share with you one more thing which is useful for differentiation. So I'm going to go to Create, and I'm going to set an assignment up, and I'm just going to call this demo assignment, and so this is ready to go. I can put my my files in from my Google Drive. I can add links, etc. But over on the right-hand side, this is quite a nice thing to do. So I can choose the students that I want it to go to. So that's a nice tool for like really for, as I say, using for differentiation, or perhaps you might want to do group work, and you can share particular files then that are going to be distinct, and they're going to be, they're going to be accessible to a particular group of students. And one other thing which is useful too, and which is a often underutilized feature of Classroom, is you can actually post to multiple classrooms at the same time. So if you teach, for example, we use a grade system at Halcyon, but if you teach, let's say you teach 3 science classes and they all happen to be in year 7, and you don't want to rewrite and you don't want to recreate all of your classrooms and combine them into one, you can very easily just go ahead and tap down on all the classes that you would like this post to be shared to. And that's just a tip which I know when I shared it with my own colleagues that they found really, really useful. But Ben, that was about a quick whistle-stop tour of Google Classroom and some of its features for remote learning. I've consciously tried to finish with about 5 minutes to spare, just in case we had any questions. So I'm going to go back here.
Superb trainer skills there, Jon. Superb. Yeah. We've just got a couple of questions actually. So Aaron was asking about your staff Google Classroom. I think if I understood the question correctly, he's just interested to know, like, is every other teacher in there as a student in that classroom? Who's in the teacher role, and just kind of how you've set that up?
Yeah, so actually, when any member of staff joins a school, we always encourage them, whenever they first enter Classroom, is to sign up as the role of a teacher. I know that when we were talking about it before, is because you might not just want to have it for people that are delivering sessions with students. It can be a really nice way. For example, we use it for our board. I know that we're using it for our admin team as well. It's just a nice way of sharing resources. And what's great is that when you're a teacher and you have the role of a teacher within Google Classroom, is yes, you can obviously set up your own classes, but you can just as easily join someone else's with a code.
And in that particular classroom, who's in the teacher role in that classroom, and who's joined the student? So it's just you as the kind of EdTech coach specialist.
Yeah. So yes, although we were very fortunately joined by Rachel, who I know was delivering one or two of the sessions in the earlier summit. So in that period of time, she created a wonderful resource, for example, in Book Creator. So she had access to that class as well.
Awesome. So there's also a question here. This was an enormous amount of info to take in for someone like myself, who is a rookie at Google Classroom. I think the reason I wanted to highlight that one is you've just shown there the resources you're using with your staff. So where would you say the best places are for a rookie with Google Classroom to go to kind of build up those key skills that you've shown there?
Okay, yeah, so definitely go to the Google for Education Training Center. Like, there are some great resources there. They'll also show you how you can kind of go on the journey through kind of learning the basics through to like becoming, getting certified as a level 1 and level 2 and then beyond. So that's really, really useful. There are some resources that are coming out all the time. I myself really enjoy watching other people demonstrate when they're doing YouTube videos. Google have their own series, which is called EDU in 90, and I would thoroughly recommend that. That's really nicely put together, and as its name suggests, it is that they try to share things within a 90-second. It's quite a loose 90-second, but in a 90-second time frame. And that's great as well. And I know that they've also recently produced, and they're updating the Teach from Home site, which is fantastic and been really useful for me actually.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Google have scrambled to produce as many resources as possible for everyone. I know there was a few comments earlier about there's a lot, obviously, sort of hitting people. So I put the Teach from Home site in the comments there, where people can pick that up and have a look. So we've got a question here. Can you add teachers but without teacher capabilities? Adding them as a student messes up the number. Oh, that's interesting. So kind of a middle role where they're not a full teacher, but they're not equally not in as a student, where they don't hand things in.
So what I would say to that is that that's a really interesting point. To my knowledge, the answer is no. However, one thing that I forgot to say is that Google are super responsive to feedback. And in the bottom left-hand corner of Classroom, or at least the last time I checked, it was the bottom left-hand corner. You can just tap on a question mark there, and you can send them feedback. And they absolutely do read every single piece of feedback which is given to them. And that's actually how all the developments arrive into Classroom, is from us as educators giving them feedback. So if you've got a suggestion like that, or anything else that you think will help you in your class and your school, then the chances are there'll be other people that will be sharing that same feedback and the same idea. So I'd recommend doing that.
Yeah, the Google Classroom team have gone across the rest of Google to kind of upskill the other teams across Google in how to respond to user feedback. So they do it better than anyone.
Wow.
So hopefully that still continues, because they do read every single part. So we've got a question coming in now. Okay, so the interaction between Google Classroom and Google Drive, which is a great question for those getting started.
Yeah. So I can see that there. So that looks like someone's asking particularly. So I mentioned in that quick demonstration that whenever you set, so when you become a Classroom teacher, you have like an overall Classroom folder, and then within that you have a folder for each class, and then within that you have a folder for each assignment. So if you're struggling to find that, if you go into your Google Classroom and just click on an assignment, and there should be a little folder where you can just open that up, and it will take you straight in to see that. If not, then please connect with me after. I've shared my Twitter handle, so please do connect. And as Bogdan said earlier, there are kind of so many people that are more than willing to kind of falling over themselves at times to sort of help other people. So if you've got any queries that you're kind of thinking about, it doesn't have to be now, but kind of after this summit, then just reach out to anyone. We'll do our best to help, but there'll be lots of other people that will help too, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. I can second and third and fourth that everyone's more than willing to help and share. What I'm just doing at the moment, I'm just doing a quick search, because there's the welcome to the first day. So this first day of Google Classroom is one of the resources on the Teacher Center. So I'll see if I can get that into the chat. Here we go. So if anyone's getting started, or particularly if you're trying to sort of support teachers getting started with Google Classroom, then the Teacher Center, the link that I've just put in the chat now, takes you to the first day's Welcome to Google Classroom. So feel free to get started with that. And there's also a series of emails you can receive. So this is a longer term process, but just some really basic getting started email series you can sign up for, which is available from Google, and that link is in there as well. I'm aware that we are now sort of starting to encroach on very late bedtimes or dinner times, and in the case of some of us, probably sort of children's bedtimes as well. So I don't want to keep people longer than they need to, so feel free to start heading out. Just a couple of, obviously there are a lot of resources from Jon, Bogdan and Kim, and a huge thank you to everyone. Actually, Bogdan is still around, so I can add him back in. So thank you to all the presenters for all of their efforts. And as we said a few times, those resources will be available. So the way that you can get a hold of those is we're going to be sending those out via the mailing list. So that's going to be a folder of all the slides, the links and things that you would need to sort of follow up on today. So feel free to sign up for the mailing list via that link if you want to get access to all those kind of things. Equally, look out for SETI and other videos that are coming out on the YouTube channel from AppsEvents. So you can subscribe in the bottom right-hand corner of the live stream if you want to just be notified when new videos are added. And obviously SETI is putting time and effort into focusing on those distance learning fundamentals, things like Google Meet, Classroom, Forms, etc. And yeah, without further ado, I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone. Thank you, Aaron. You're still up. Good effort. Martha, much appreciated. And wanting more. So when is the next session? Good question. Generally, we wanted to see how today went in terms of kind of a proof of concept. So we'll look at scheduling some follow-up ones to these. And again, any feedback you've got around the types of things you want to see a little bit more of, or things that maybe we're missing from today, we'd be interested to hear from you. So that can be via the Twitter account. So if you want to sort of just bombard the AppsEvents Twitter account with, I want a bit more of this or a bit less of that, then we'd be really keen to hear, so we can make sure we continue to support everyone as they work incredibly hard to manage the current COVID situation and make learning continue in challenging circumstances. So thank you all for all your efforts. I think there's a lot of key workers out there that need a bit of support and credit, teachers, nurses, and our delivery guys. Cool. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to say a big thank you to our speakers once more, and just say have a great rest of the day, whatever time it is. Cheers very much.
Cheers, guys.
Look out for the recording on the channel soon.